All right, we're going to call to order the May 9th meeting of the West Sacramento City Council, Redevelopment, Successor Agency, and Financing Authority. We're going to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. We'd like to invite our guests to join the council and staff in the pledge, which tonight is going to be led by Charlene Hamilton.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The council did not meet in closed session this evening, so we're going to proceed directly to our general administration agenda, item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the city council. As is noted on our agenda, we're prohibited by state law from taking action or having a discussion on items that are brought up under item 1A, but it is an important opportunity for a public forum. We do ask that anyone that wishes to address the council on this or any other agenda item this evening to please fill out one of the yellow cards that's available near the front door and turn it into the city clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer, and that simply gives us an opportunity to make sure everyone gets a chance to be heard. And so we ask that all comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart, and that simply indicates which agenda the council is currently considering. The clerk accepts the yellow cards all the way up to the conclusion of the staff report on any particular agenda item. Once the staff report is complete and the public testimony and the council questions and discussion have begun, we don't take any additional speaking cards. So if you're here on a specific agenda item, please be sure to get the card before the end of the staff report, but in most cases that's plenty of time from now. We also recognize that for a lot of folks, speaking in public can cause anxiety or discomfort. So we ask that there not be any boos or cat calls of speakers, and that also no applause or other demonstrations. We try to maintain a civil discourse here in the chambers. So with that, we have a couple requests to speak under item 1A first. The first is by Christina Vincent. And John Vincent also is next. So.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is John Vincent, and as you know, I'm responsible for the knucklehead that sets all the flags up. My daughter here is in the Air Force, and she's been deployed 3 times, and the last time she was deployed, she took some flags with her and flew them over to the theater in the Middle East. And I'd like her to read this. I don't have my glasses, or else I'd read it.
Operation Inherent Resolve, Certificate of Authenticity. This American flag was flown in honor of the city of West Sacramento on April 18th, 2018. This flag flew in support of Operation Inherent Resolve on a KC-10 extender of the 908th Expeditionary Air Refueling Squadron from Al Dhafar Air Base in UAE. This flag represents the commitment of the men and women of the armed forces, the global war on terrorism, and honors the thousands who died in the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and the fields of Pennsylvania on September 11th, 2001. Let all who look upon this flag be reminded of their accomplishments and the steadfast devotion to protecting the freedoms our flag represents.
And this is to show myself and my family the appreciation that the city has worked with us all these years in allowing us to set that field up. We also have one set up for the Police Department, West Sacramento Police Department, and we have one for the Fire Department.
And at this time, we ask that the chiefs of the fire and police department step forward to accept their flags.
Keep an eye on that clock, kid.
Will do.
This is in remembrance of the 343 firefighters that lost their lives, and for the 50 memory of the 50 police officers and Port Authority officers who lost their lives.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much. Thank you very much.
Ma'am, thank you so much.
And Mayor, would you like to come down, or can I just come up there and hand it to you? And that's a wrap. Thank you very much.
John, first of all, thank you so much, Mr. Vincent, for you for this tonight, but also for always bringing out the spirit and the patriotism of our community and our town, and reminding us of why we exist as a country and what it takes to protect all of our rights and our independence. And you know this, but so many people in our community and throughout the region really treasure the opportunity that you create to feel and to express and to support our country and our troops every single year. And to do that not just alone in our own homes, but to come out and do it together with our neighbors and with our friends and our brothers and sisters and those who are serving. And so thank you so much. And Christina, I know for other folks in the community, it warms our hearts to see the family tradition of service and patriotism and care for our country. And thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your example and for your leadership and for bringing the values and the spirit and the hearts of the people of West Sacramento to the defense of the country and to freedom. Thank you so much, both of you.
Mr. Mayor, it takes a community to raise a child, and this community did a damn good job of attending my children.
All right, thank you, John. Jennifer Galenti. And after Jennifer will be Stephanie Houston.
So I'm not really well with the public speaking, so bear with me
You're
here.
with friends and neighbors and.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Jennifer Galenti, and I have lived in West Sacramento for 30-plus years. I love my hometown of West Sacramento, and I love the community that we have built and the uniqueness of the community fabric we weave. I especially love to shop locally and support small, local, and family-owned businesses, which I believe are an important part of our community fabric. I'm here today to share my concerns for businesses which are tenants at the Southport Town Center. I have spent my entire adult life in West Sacramento, and I have seen a number of small, local-owned businesses close due to extremely high rent rates. And with these businesses close and the corporate entities who are able to afford rents move in, our community fabric changes. What can I say? What can the city do to help? I shop locally, and I encourage everyone I know to do it as well. But I believe we need more from our city leadership. Small businesses, incentive tax credits, grants, opportunities, and more. Also, would the city consider investing some research time to see if retail rates in Southport Town Center are fair rates for the area? That's all I have, and thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for being here with us tonight. And Stephanie Houston?
Good evening. I'm Stephanie Houston. I own Lux Living, which is in Town Center Plaza. As I'm following up on Jen, the rents are high. I am new to the area, so I had no idea the comings and goings of all the small businesses. But as I've opened, I've had a lot of community come in and talk to me about their favorite places that have gone out because the rent's too high. I questioned the rent coming here. I've been a business owner for many years in Chico, and it did seem high compared to what I'm used to, but they assured me, the company, that it is achievable. But this is a very small town, and this community is pretty fantastic. When they heard that I might have to close, they completely rallied around me. Well, in talking further, I have found out there's more than 6 of us business owners in that complex that are about ready to close their doors. The property management and the ownership don't seem to be very open to a conversation with any of us. So what I'm wanting to know is there anything the city can do to build a better relationship with some of these out-of-town ownerships of these plazas? There's not a lot of choices of where to open up shop in this town. It's a small town. There's only 3 major complexes, and they're out-of-town ownership. If there is somebody to kind of bridge that gap and help create a relationship with the city and small business does bring a lot to a city, and the sales tax dollars stay within the community. So I just want to bring it to attention for me and my customers. They have been very loyal and supportive. It hasn't even been a year, but I feel the love, and they're all here to fight for me. So I just want somebody to recognize that this is a problem, and if somebody could take a look into it and see if there's any resolution. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, as I said, we cannot take any action on items that are brought up under 1A or have a discussion, but I know we have a nationally known small business expert on the city council, so Mr. Ledesma, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for showing up today and letting us know what you're going through as a small business owner. My dad was a small business owner for 35 years, and as the mayor said, I'm involved professionally with small businesses across the country and issues. This is not, I'm aware of the issues. We've had them before at the Southport Town Center. I know our economic development staff I've worked with before to try to understand the dynamics of the mall. So I'm not happy to hear your story today. So I'm just going to ask if the economic development director and staff offline, if we could schedule something, and please include the business owner so we can maybe go back and look at what we looked at before and see if there's some way we can help bridge this gap around at least communication with that folks. So I'll ask if we can do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ledesma, and it's quite true. Our power is virtually zero in this domain, but the influence that we have is just like the folks who came tonight, that our collective voices and collective spending power can make a difference. I'm not a small business expert by training, only by shopping, and watching my neighbors in town put their life savings on the line to make something spectacular happen and to do something that nobody knew they even needed until it happened. And it's the things that beyond the Subways and the Starbucks that make this community not some other community. Every time a small business closes because of some of these issues, not only do we lose that small business, but there are another 10 or 20 or 50 folks in town with an entrepreneurial spirit that see, oh, maybe I can't do it. Maybe my dream isn't possible. So it's bigger than just Flex Living tonight. It is about our ability to support and sustain a healthy small business economy for places to enjoy, but also for residents here to get out there and do great things and unleash this, the spectacular that's in each one of us. And so yes, we will continue. As has been said, we've had issues not just with this center. I've got endlessly frustrated with commercial centers that leave things vacant for decades, waiting for an extra $10 a month in lease payments. I don't understand it, but again, I'm not the expert in this space. But you know already from what you saw yesterday, the support in the community. But know that we're with you too. So we're prepared to help. All right. So with that, then that's the last on item 1A. So we're going to proceed to item 1B, which is council communications. Are there reports? Are there communications this evening? Mr. Johannesson?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the Yellow Housing met today. The most significant item we discussed were our Executive Director, Lisa Baker, spent some time in Washington, D.C. going over proposals for HUD funding. A lot of bad news coming out, but the proposals center around, I think, a concept that folks should not get too comfortable in public housing and finding ways to move them out quicker. One of the proposals is to raise the minimum rent that can be charged on some of these projects. And for Yolo County Housing, that means about 13% of people that are in housing now would not be able to afford to be there. Another 15% that are on the voucher program could not afford to be able to be there. So what this is also doing is putting a lot of pressure on landlords, because without folks to rent the places, it's going to affect the economic viability. So just a lot of bad news coming out of the federal government HUD on these issues. But the California Association of Housing Authorities, which our Lisa Baker is a member of, is working heartily to advocate for the members of Congress for changes that would be meaningful to our housing projects. And that's it. Thanks.
All right. Pro Tem Ledesma.
Thank you. This past Monday, the 7th, right? Yeah, the 7th was the meeting of the Yellow Habitat Conservancy. On that agenda, we approved financial reports, the budget, and some amendments to the joint powers agreement, minor ones. It was a fairly somewhat uneventful meeting. I'm happy to report back to the council. If you didn't see it already, a few of our board members posted it. But the board at the Yolo Conservancy finally, after years of work, adopted certified the environmental documents needed for the plan, and actually adopted the habitat plan and NCCP for that project. This has been years, say decades in the making, a really fine effort by everybody in the county. It was the county, Winters, West Sacramento, Woodland, and Davis that banded together, brought this JPA back from really the brink of financial chaos, worked hard to get the plan back together, and got it through both the state and federal agencies, who were phenomenal partners to get this plan through in a timely manner. These plans take years to get done, and we were managed, when it was resuscitated in 2011 and 12, managed to get the plan done in 2018 and adopted. And now we will see it again. This body will see the final plan, and I think this is the 23rd meeting, I think, where they'll be here. And you can go through the plan yourself. It's a plan that will protect habitat for 12 species, and it will make, more importantly, that it bands together the really important. What it does is it worked with, as you know, farmers, ranchers, in a collaborative effort into that effort. So one of Yolo County's what it's best known for is our agricultural land, and we were able to put together a plan that leveraged our best resources, allowed the land to hold up and be held for habitat throughout the county. And then for economic development reasons, it's a benefit to those, because it streamlines the permitting process now for all the cities in the county on projects going forward. So there's only kind of one permitting process, which is through the Conservancy now. The permits will be in hand if everybody certifies them in June. It's a huge accomplishment. It can't be understated. I know most people, I know I didn't when I started this endeavor, didn't really understand what the plan was about. But now that we've been in it, it is a direct benefit. It says so much about our county's commitment to conserving land and conserving habitat, protecting habitat for wildlife. So I'm extremely pleased of this endeavor. And again, thanks go out to our colleagues in Davis, Woodland, Winters, and the county, Yolo County, and most important to the staff that worked on this. I want to thank our staff. Charlene was there on Monday. Thank you, Charlene, for being present and helping to usher this plan through. To our city manager, Marty Tuttle, who lent resources as we resuscitated this plan. And to our staff, our finance staff, everybody throughout this county really came through and made sure this plan is something we all can be proud of. So I'm happy to report that got done, and we're now moving towards implementation, and we'll hear more about that as we come together on the 23rd. So that's our report for today.
Well, just to your report, I'd like to add a thank you to you. And you described all the roles that everybody played, except for yourself, and we wouldn't be at this place if you had not stepped in as one of the leaders of that JPA to fix it, to fix the problem, and to really wrangle it with the state and federal agencies and with the other folks in the county. And it was a lot of work and a lot of time and an endeavor that most of the time seemed like it was doomed to fail. And you stuck with it, and when you'd rather be home having dinner with your family, you were out there working on it. So this, and for something that will never be a headline, is not the most glorious, exciting thing that we do. But without it, both our progress would be stunted, and species around our community and around the county would be gravely endangered. So thank you very much for leading this process on behalf of the council, but on behalf of the whole county as well. A couple quick reports. The SACOG hosted a regional forum for all the elected officials, all the city and county officials in the region in Carmichael last week around the future of the region. It's partly and the way in which elected officials and our partners are engaged in the development of the next Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy, but really more in the domain of what does the future look like and how can we shape it. You know, the last time we did this region-wide was the launching point really for the blueprint, and the impact of that in terms of the changes in the land use and transportation system in the region have been profound. This one was intended to be the same thing, but really focused on some of the economic issues. And so we had the report that the Brookings Institution has been preparing on behalf of Valley Vision and SACOG and the Metro Chamber and other business organizations in the region. That was released, and the forum focused on those areas. And that report was both encouraging and sobering. Encouraging in that it identified many of the strengths that the Sacramento region has and many of the improvements that we've been making and many of the assets that we have. At the same time, it identified some areas that we need to focus more on. We need to be concerned about as a region. An example of that was on the asset side, UC Davis is one of the most productive research universities in the world in terms of generation of new research that has applicability in the commercial sector. And yet our rate of conversion of that research into startups, into new products, into new jobs is much lower than it is in many, many other places in the country. And the council knows that we visited a couple of other cities in the country around that are trying to grapple with that. But Brookings definitely identified that area as an area of critical importance if we're going to be competitive in the future, but also have a region of good jobs and good opportunity going forward as well. So that was identified as one of the key priority areas, as well as broadening educational and workforce achievement throughout the whole region, particularly in areas like West Sacramento. And so the home run and the work that we're doing here on preschool and internships in college was highlighted as a potential strategy in that domain, but one that was definitely articulated as a key priority for the whole region if we're going to continue to be competitive. And then there was a lot of work on specific clusters and sectors that we might focus on in the region, and what that really means to focus on them in ways that we deploy our infrastructure and our housing and other investments in ways that support that. And so one of those key clusters is the cluster that here is anchored by the Bayer collaborator space that we opened last month, the collaborator that's in Berlin, San Francisco, and West Sacramento. That is an anchor point along with some other businesses in this city for startups that emerge from work that's happening at UC Davis. But the city of Davis doesn't have the capacity or the scale or the connection to logistics and distribution that we have. And so the collaborator and Molecular Matrix, which just got a major investment last month, and other companies are examples of what Brookings and others think needs to happen in this region, which is that places like this in West Sacramento need to be the on-ramp to real startups and entrepreneurship and business development that comes from that research. So they identified a lot of challenges in the region, but I think on a hopeful side, many of the strategies that they said were important for the region as a whole to take were things that were either already underway here or required more investments here by the rest of the region. So positive in that regard. Then the SACOG board met and took up a bunch of items, but probably the most important one was action on whether or not to support what position to take on the proposed repeal of SB 1. And as the council knows, there have been signatures circulated and have been turned in from folks who are opposed to SB 1 and hoping to qualify a referendum on that. That would be on the November ballot. And the SACOG board had a vigorous debate about this issue. SACOG, being from Auburn and Galt and Live Oak and Yuba City, and then Davis and Sacramento and West Sacramento and others, it's a microcosm of California, and so all of the issues and the politics and the ideology came into play. But ultimately, by more than a 2/3 vote, bipartisan, with West Sacramento and Davis and other places, along with Lincoln and Roseville and others in the region voting to oppose the repeal of SB 1. SB1 because road rehabilitation repair is a key priority for all of our cities. Our citizens have made that clear, our businesses have made that clear, and SB1 is the first time we've had a significant investment by the state in trying to tackle that and other transportation challenges. So it was a close debate, but ultimately the vote was pretty overwhelming in support of preserving SB1. And finally, I'm not reporting on cap to cap because I believe that my colleagues did last time, and that satisfies my obligation to do so. But I also participated in an international summit on civic engagement and crowdsourcing, sponsored by the New Cities Foundation in London. And this was a follow-up to a session that we did last year on civic crowdsourcing, which can include things like Kickstarter-style campaigns for public improvements in facilities. There are several platforms by which folks can, that are active in other places, by which folks can try to raise money for something like Bridgeway Play, for example, through a Kickstarter-like campaign. So that's an example of crowdsourcing. But so is calling upon 2,000 people to come and build the Kaboom Park. Right, so those are, which is not a technology-based form of crowdsourcing. But interestingly, West Sacramento is seen as one of the more innovative places in the world around how to deploy crowdsourcing. And part of that is the work that we're doing with Zen City, which is one of our smart city venture investments that we're making from Measure E. Zen City is the crowdsourcing platform around listening to what citizens are already saying on social media, rather than only looking at public hearings and public meetings. That's a platform that is being tested right now in 2 places in the world outside of Israel: Paris, France, and West Sacramento, California. And so as are the lessons that we're learning around how to use technology and integrate technology and deal with issues around privacy, around how to hear everyone and not just the loudest folks, and the critical issues frankly for civic engagement in the 21st century were brought out well, and it was great to see West Sacramento featured in such a way. The next day, Microsoft's venture fund decided to make a significant investment in Zen City itself as well, and same thing. Microsoft Ventures and the Bloomberg Philanthropies identified Zen City and the pilot work we're doing with them as one of the most promising innovations in civic technology that's on the landscape right now. So, congrats to John Robinson if he's in the room or can hear the meeting. That work is it's day-to-day work inside City Hall. It's nothing exciting in the moment, but it is exciting in terms of trying to reinvent civic engagement in a way that really gives voice to a broader range of people in our communities. All right, item 1C is appointments to boards and commissions. We have none this evening, so that brings us to the consent agenda. So let me know, the city manager. First, on item 17, we will lack a quorum on item 17 due to a potential conflict because the site is proximate to my personal residence, and so I would be recusing myself from that item, which would mean that we would have less than a quorum, and therefore the city manager is requesting that the remaining members of the council consider continuing that item to a date certain of May 23rd.
Move that item.
Second. I'll second.
Can you call for the vote?
Well, can we vote on with 2?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to continue item 17 to May 23rd, correct? That's what we're asking. So all those in favor say aye.
I would suggest a roll call.
A roll call vote, please. Thank you.
Councilmember Johannesson?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma?
Yes,
And Mayor Cabaldon will be recusing, so.
yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. So that then brings us to the remainder of the consent agenda. But that wasn't even on consent, but items 2 through 14, are there items for separate question or comment, or any item to remove from consent?
3 and 12.
12?
3 and 12.
3 and 12.
Thank you. And 13, please.
Okay, and I have, wait, did you say 3 and 12 or 10?
12.
Okay, great. All right, item 3 then is consideration of a contract with Bureau Veritas for review and permitting services for the co-location of telecommunications facilities on street light and traffic signal poles. Mr. Johannesson?
Yes, I pulled this item because I wanted to see if staff could give a presentation. I think this is a pretty big deal. We've got through with the broadband study, which I think we started maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And now this is a really good step toward implementation of citywide Wi-Fi, an issue we've identified as a huge need throughout. So I just wanted to, maybe if staff can kind of get an overview of where we are. And I just have a couple questions on the project itself, but.
I'm not seeing this come on. Oh, there we go. There's no light. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the board. Mark Zolo from City Community Development. So we have an agreement with AT&T to co-locate small cell infrastructure onto city-owned streetlights and traffic signals. The item tonight will engage Bureau Veritas to provide 3 services, basically. The first one is really important, is to develop guidelines so that we have streamlined infrastructure and it's managed in an aesthetic way and an efficient manner. And the second is to manage the physical integration with the city infrastructure so it doesn't conflict. There aren't utility billing issues and issues of that nature. And then lastly is to coordinate their work in the city's right of way, so that's done to standard. We think the agreement will help AT&T develop their plans and specs to a level that they can come in and be done efficiently and get the infrastructure out into the city in a more expeditious fashion. We haven't been approached by any other carriers at this time, and AT&T's tiptoeing into 5G, mostly looking at it from a congestion point of view, and they're going to use small cells to help manage load through their networks. And the first pilot project will be around IKEA and Business 80, around that area, not Business 80, but 80. And that'll be one of the test cases. And they're also in the field right now, and citing other extensions of the facility as it develops. I imagine it'll be an incremental approach to them, and I don't know how it'll scale up, but I imagine within 2 or 3 years we'll start to see this form of infrastructure pretty commonly around the city.
Right, and so this is 5G, which is going to be necessary for autonomous vehicles. So
Yes.
this will be a critical part of that infrastructure. Now, so this is non-exclusive to AT&T. It's just, it'll be, they are going to be potentially a partner in the 5G rollout. And this is citywide 5G. It's not just sections of town, but our goal is to have citywide deployment of 5G. So just on the issue of the technology, so Verizon, I think in Sacramento, is doing 5Gs in specific locations. So the reports seem to indicate that AT&T was just focusing on latency. So so can you explain the difference between the AT&T's approach versus what Verizon is doing?
There's a couple things at play, and I'm not the expert to talk about that. But one of the things at play is branding. So they're all trying to brand what they're doing as 5G because that's the buzz. And the devices are just emerging on the market right now. The standards have been fortified, and the infrastructure hardware is hitting the market right now. The engineering approaches that they'll use will vary, and there's different ways to do it. So what is 5G is a continuum of technologies. The key aspects of it are the virtualization of the processes that control the networks, and that is the true benefit of it, because you're moving from hardware and hard machinery to software and virtualized machines. So that allows the planes of service, how things are controlled, the throughput, the types of services that are done to be virtualized. So how it'll manifest can be quite variable, and all the carriers have their different routes that they're going to try to use to employ it. The Sprint T-Mobile merger right now, they're touting their breadth of bandwidth and how they'll use that for 5G. What that means, I can't say for sure, but that's their approach right now. Verizon's sprinting, so to speak, to get a full nationwide 5G network up and running so they can have those bragging rights. And AT&T is taking a more methodical approach, using a long-term evolutionary approach, but it'll be using 5G technologies to get there.
Yeah, I would just, caution as we move forward to make sure that we're not left behind. I know there's certain business reasons for taking a cautionary approach to this, and obviously there's a marketing element as well for Verizon to do what they're doing, but we wouldn't want to be caught going down a path that's going to lead to a lot slower implementation of this really necessary technology.
Yeah, I suspect that the market's going to drive them pretty hard to get it going, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's just no two ways about it for them.
Well, good work on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Mark. All right, item 9 is consideration of purchase of handheld data collection units from MBA Systems, Inc. Just a couple of questions, Mr. Deputy Chief. How did these units capture RIPA data? I'm sure it's here. I kept reading it. I wasn't sure how. Like, there's some chip they're reading inside me that tells the machine
The
that.
technical explanation is not in that report.
Okay.
But the reality is beyond just having the capacity as a ticket writer, it has a high degree of programmability. And so we're going to be able to actually program in the data capture that will meet the RIPA standards. So we'll be able to use the same type of integration that the ticket writer itself utilizes to do the same thing to feed the RIPA data, any kind of contact information, directly into our record management system.
So is there anything a decent smartphone can't do that this system can do other than print the ticket, or is?
The basis of this is a cellular device, and so a lot of it will be app-based attributes. And again, additionally, the software specifically associated with the Crossroads system, it will be part of the backbone of this particular device, but it avails us the opportunity to build out other apps that can work off that same platform.
Okay. I'm asking because it's for two reasons. One is a $2,500 cell phone with a printer, but I'm also, as we've been doing this, like body-worn cameras, which are very similar to a cell phone camera, but they do less actually. This one's similar to a cell phone, but does printing also. An officer may or may not have a cell phone also. I'm curious as to what your device strategy is on a going for, like if you have a bespoke custom device for every function that you might start implementing as more and more as smart policing or technology assisted policing, so at some point it's going to weigh people down.
Our hope would be that that a device, and this device in particular, can integrate a lot of that functionality. Just as an example, even as simple as the ability to take photos is a significant thing. That means we're hopefully not buying cameras to equip folks with, and the reality is some of those things get damaged, so there's a replacement cycle. So this thing is also built out with some degree of durability, more than just a typical cell phone. So that is the hope, is that we can integrate a lot of things, because as you said, we don't want to be carrying around 20 different devices that just have singular functions.
Okay, great, thanks.
If I can.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma?
Actually, I'm going to ask, just make a quick comment on the previous agenda item, just to thank you and the police chief and the department for, once again, providing the briefing on the 21st century policing. You have been absolutely consistent and given us this data, given us updates. It's good to see that we're continuing to make progress on crime activity in the city. I just want to again, thank you just for continuing and to provide us with that. And the data look good. I know the first quarter had some bumps, but I think, one quarter does not a trend make. So, but anyway, I just want to thank you again for your commitment to that. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item 10 is consideration and approval of plans and specifications and award of construction contract to Telfer Payment Technologies for the 2018 pavement and striping repairs, various locations.
Yeah, I just really had a comment on this because this is, I know you brought up earlier, Mr. Mayor, around the discussion you had, lively discussion you had at SACOG about the use of, about SB1 funds. And this is, for me, really good example of what we intended with, we were hoped for with SB1 funds as well as with Measure E funds. That is a real plan to put renewed striping and paving to areas that need it. So, you know, from what I read, it's project funding will come about 200, about half of it from, less than half from Measure E, and the other half, 250,000 from SB1. That's exactly what we had anticipated. How can we leverage the SB1 along with our dollars to really make an impactful difference? The other part that this incorporates, which I really appreciate, we talked about Zen City, starting to use some data we're hearing about. We hear about residents who find roads, maybe need some repair, some repaving. That's the feedback we get sometimes. Isn't it nice that there's potholes? And it's, you know, in prior days, it would take one of us actually hitting one or getting a call from our neighbors, and you know, there's potholes over here, and getting several of them before we can deploy. And this is really where we are able to gather data from different sources and being able to say, I think we have a real problem on Enterprise or a real problem on Linden or wherever. So this really, I know it's a restriping and pavement, which doesn't seem a lot, but it's actually, for me, it's huge because they're actually deploying those dollars. And I know it's going to be going to 2018-19 season, and but it's just really helpful. The only other ask, and it's trivial, and but maybe relook at the Measure E logo on that you're proposing to use. I certainly want Measure E next to SB1 as the place. It's just design-wise, wondering if maybe I want taking a second look on that. That's just me, though.
No, that's right. Yeah, no, folks should know that where their money's going, so. All right.
So thank you.
All right, item 12 then is update on the pilot on-demand rideshare service. So first, I want to just give you an opportunity to make a pitch about the launch.
Sure. So, good evening, Mayor, council members. All of you should have received an invitation to the launch of the Via On-Demand Rideshare service. It's going to be Monday morning, May 14th, from 10 o'clock to 11 a.m. Over in the Bridge District at Ballpark and Riverfront Drive. There's going to be a few of the Via vans available for demonstration rides. And service will actually be starting earlier that day, so you can even take one over if you'd like. So starting at 7 a.m. And operating Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and Saturdays, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Terrific.
We're excited about it. Thank you.
All right, so
Mr. Johanna.
I think I pulled this one. Oh, Sarah, just quick, before you sit down. So I appreciate the work you've done also for the delay, handling the delay of the wheelchair accessible van. Because I think unfortunately, we're not going to have it. It'll be 2 weeks after this particular event. But it's really important, I think, that this kind of ride-sharing service is not just for folks who want to go downtown or wherever, but it's for folks that have limited mobility. And it's part of our age-friendly plan in West Sacramento. So I'm really glad that it looks like that you reached out to the folks, and they don't really have too much of a problem with it being 2 weeks. But I just wanted to thank you for doing that outreach and at least getting that issue handled. And I'm looking forward to a successful launch of this.
Great, thank you.
And the same, I noticed that too, is that you actually talk to them, work with them, they understand and are willing to wait as long as we do the follow-up and the advertising on it. And it is a good point, because I did, Councilmember Johannesson, speak with Regional Transit, which has launched their version of a microtransit service, and they had said, that the ridership on that, the demand on that is really, it's off the charts. And I think ours will be better, but that's what we're piloting. But B, a lot of ridership is with the elderly, and that's the real need. So it is important, I think, to kind of have that out there. So thank you for reaching out to them.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And item 13 is consideration of Resolution 18-38, supporting Yolo County's proposal for Measure K, a general tax on the gross receipts from cannabis-related activities in unincorporated Yolo County.
Thank you. I think, is Mr. Vegas in here?
Yes.
I just want to allow a moment for our supervisor and one-time Uber driver to be able to speak to this. And I want to personally thank Mr. Villegas for his leadership as on the County Board of Supervisors on this issue, and allow you some time to talk a little bit about this.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. So I think the staff report and the resolution really do speak for itself. The staff report's pretty well written, but I will add a couple things. In 2016, when the voters passed Prop 64, essentially legalizing adult recreational marijuana, it was really a two-part process. The voters essentially said they are okay with legalizing it as long as there is a taxing system to generate some tax off of the marijuana that the effects would be are unknown yet. And so what the law said was cities and counties could decide what they wanted to do in terms of taxing it. And so this is a really unique opportunity for Yolo County residents to sort of capitalize on a commercial cannabis gross receipts tax that will be placed before the voters in Measures K in June, just less than a month from now. But what's unique about this opportunity is that it also sort of signals support by both the industry and elected officials to support a tax, which is unusual, but also allows residents of the city of West Sacramento to vote on a tax of the cultivation industry in the unincorporated parts of the county. So it's a little bit unique in that residents of the city get to vote on something that's not going to affect them directly. This is going to be a tax on the unincorporated cultivators in Yolo County. So it's a unique opportunity to take advantage of a situation where there is support by both the cultivators and elected officials. So hopefully you'll support the resolution. That's the request for this evening.
Thank you, Supervisor.
All right, very good.
Mr. Johannesson.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Councilmember Villegas. So I'm totally supportive of this measure as well. But there's an article in the Bee today that was maybe kind of clouds over the whole cannabis industry. There's a huge black market forming, and I think the gist of the article was that the jurisdictions are starting to lay on so much in taxes that it's forcing this business to go back underground. And the state is even looking at potentially reducing, the state tax to allow it to be more competitive. Did you all have that kind of discussion about, I know this isn't a huge tax, it's not, it doesn't seem to be unduly burdensome, but, once you start tacking on state and local and everything.
Sure, no, absolutely. In fact, yes, we did. Over the course of the last year, that was the centerpiece of the conversation that led to the tax measure, largely because there was so much illegal operations occurring in the unincorporated parts of Yolo County that they were undermining the legal operators. And so, which is exactly why the tax measure before the voters has that flexibility to kind of toggle as low as 1% and up to 15% in the event that the industry can withstand that kind of a tax burden. But you're absolutely right. So the revenues that are going to be generated from this are going to be used specifically to go after the illegal operators to make sure that it's a fair playing field for the legal ones.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
All right, yeah, thanks for being here. I mean, it is the case that nobody here is going to be paying it. There aren't a whole lot of, well, if there's an owner of a commercial cannabis business in the unincorporated area that lives in West Sacramento, then he or she will be paying it. But I think the vast majority of West Sacramentans may not know that just the financial relationship between the city and the county. And the county, Yolo County, which we're all, besides its internationally recognized name brand, is a real leader in California for protecting habitat and farmland and agriculture and landscapes, working landscapes, and that comes at a cost. By determining that the county will not be hosting big box malls and gigantic housing developments and other sorts of things, and instead that development will occur in the cities where it belongs, the county forgoes a significant amount of revenue that counties like Sacramento are able to achieve by permitting sprawl to go all over the place. Right. And so it is, we benefit in the city by being surrounded by farms that help to feed us and keep us healthy, but also by just beautiful landscapes and by the heritage and the bounty of nature that we've inherited. And it's where we have an opportunity to help the county to maintain its financial viability and to do its job to protect the, as you described, and some of the other essential public services that the county provides in our community. To me, it's our obligation to help, and so I'm very supportive of moving forward with this resolution of support for the measure, because it's carefully balanced. I know you in particular have led a lot of work at the county to achieve, high standards of safety and what have you, and achieving that balance, but there's a cost that needs to be paid in order to meet the county's revenue needs, and I think it's entirely appropriate. So thanks for coming tonight.
Of course. Yep. Thank you.
All right, anything else on consent?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the consent, and all items on the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Before we proceed to item 15, later in the agenda, the city manager is requesting that we postpone item 22 to May 23rd, to the May 23rd meeting. That's the item on the residential parking permits. And so I'm flagging that now. I know Ms. Harris has come on that item in particular, and we will open the public hearing at that time if you want to speak on it tonight. If you end up leaving and coming back when we're actually taking it up for a vote, that's fine too. But be assured that when we get to it, even if we continue to the next meeting, we'll open the public hearing in order to take the comments, since you've already been with us all this time tonight and every day. All right, so that brings us to item 15, which is public hearing and consideration of resolution 18-12, confirming the diagram and assessment and ordering improvements for maintenance to be made to landscaping and lighting district number 1. Mr. Bloomberg.
Yes. Every year, we come before the council to have a public hearing and have the council approve putting the lighting and landscaping number 1 assessments on the next year's tax roll. There is no increase in the assessment from last year, and so if you have any questions about the report, I'd be glad to answer them.
All right, seeing no questions, then we're going to, thank you, Mr. Bloomberg. We're going to open the public hearing on item 15. We don't have any requests to speak, but because it is a public hearing, does anyone wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and return it to the council for any further question or discussion or motion on item 15.
I'll move the recommended action.
And I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Item 16 is a public hearing and consideration of resolution 18-13, confirming the diagram and assessment and ordering improvements for the storm drain maintenance district number 1, Rayleigh's Landing. Mr. Bloomberg.
The same procedure for this item as for the previous agenda item.
Then same facts in terms of no rate increase and what have you?
No rate increase from the previous year. And again, this is the storm drain maintenance district that is in the Washington neighborhood.
Okay. Right, the Washington neighborhood south of the D Street.
Correct. Well, actually, I think it goes all the way up to C Street. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so any further, any questions for Mr. Bloomberg?
No.
Seeing none, thanks. We're going to open the public hearing on item 16. Does anyone wish to address the council on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Return to the council for any further question or debate or a motion.
I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. By previous order, item 17 has been continued to May 23rd. Item 18 is a public hearing and first reading of ordinance 18-4 regarding a development agreement for a proposed wholesale cannabis logistics, distribution, and transportation facility at 2505 Front Street, Suite A. Mr. Laffey.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Before you tonight for your consideration is a development agreement with Dyka Distribution to operate an approximately 15,000 square foot wholesale cannabis logistics, distribution, and transportation facility in an existing one-story multi-tenant building in the light industrial zone at 2505 Front Street, Suite A. The City Municipal Code allows for this use in the light industrial zone with approval of a conditional use permit by Planning Commission and a development agreement approved by City Council. The development agreement for your consideration tonight includes many provisions, many of which have been included in previously approved approved development agreements. A few notable provisions in the DA before you tonight are that the business cannot have any exterior signage on the building or on any of the vehicles, and that's also a requirement in the municipal code. They're also required to have a safety and security plan, which would be approved by the police department prior to operation. And then third, the business would be required to pay the city 2.5% of their gross receipts. The Planning Commission considered this item at their meeting on April 5th, and they approved the conditional use permit and Resolution 18-1 PC, recommending that council approve Ordinance 18-4 to approve the development agreement before you tonight. This item before you tonight is very similar to the previous 6 cannabis-related items that have come before council. The same requirements would apply. The development agreement was tweaked a little bit by the city attorney, but for the most part, it's the same. This concludes my remarks. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is also in attendance tonight to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for staff at this time?
Nope.
All right. Thanks, Seamus. All right, with that, then we're going to open the public hearing on item 18, and we do have a couple of requests to speak on this item. The first is by Din Wing. Welcome.
Hello, how are you, Mayor and City Council? My name is Dean Wee. I'm in West Sacramento almost 15 years, since you guys know me well. I have a question concern about campus, talking about, because we just purchased a brand new building, remodeled, become a bigger bakery. Now they're next to us. I'm concerned about safety for my employee and safety and business, what happened, if something go wrong, because we're a bakery, we are 24 hours a day, producing product. We need to be into our facility to make our product. I'm concerned about safety and my business. If something go wrong, I need to know how you protect my business and my people. That's it. Pretty simple.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you. And Ryan Brower?
Good evening. My name is Ryan Brower. I'm the Director of Operations for DECA Distribution. I'm joined tonight by 2 colleagues, Nick Gonzalez, our Director of Science and Education, and Keith Higgins, our Director of Security. Give you a little bit of background on the team here assembled before you. Nick was educated at the University of Arizona in engineering and also completed a very prestigious master's brewing program in Munich, Germany. Nick has parlayed both his engineering and education and brewing certification into several successful startup ventures. Nick is tasked with being our project manager, our engineer, our architect, and our government relation liaison. Keith is a retired police officer and Marine Corps veteran. Keith worked 14 years for a California law enforcement agency, and during that career, Keith was a police officer. He worked patrol, training, and spent 6 years as a member of the SWAT team. Prior to that, Keith spent 8 years in the U.S. Marine Corps. 4 of those years were spent working at the White House, providing security for the President of the United States during the Clinton administration. Keith has over 20 years of experience in law enforcement and the various aspects of security industry. Keith is tasked with developing our security procedures while also working hand in hand with local enforcement officers like Police Lieutenant Steele and Fire Marshal Johnson. A little bit about myself. I have spent nearly 20 years in various roles within the logistics and distribution industry, both internationally and domestically for firms like Maersk and Penske. For the past 10 years, I've focused primarily on temperature control, final mile delivery, hub and spoke logistics, pool distribution, and dedicated fleet operations. On the warehouse side, I've opened up and managed several facilities, both dry and temp control, for both multi-user and dedicated footprints. As a contracted third-party logistics partner, I have managed the storage and distribution networks in California for 3 of the largest alcohol distributors in the world. My responsibilities at DECA include designing, implementing, and managing our licensed cannabis distribution network here in California. On behalf of the team assembled here tonight, I'd like to thank the West Sacramento City Council for the opportunity to further discuss any questions, concerns, or comments that you may have about our application to become a licensed cannabis distributor here in the great city of West Sacramento. But before we begin the conversation, we'd like to formally thank a few integral parties to this process. To the West Sacramento Planning Commission, thank you very much for your decision to move Deca Distribution forward in this licensing process. To Mr. Seamus Laffey, Assistant Planner, a very, very big thank you to Seamus for constantly being the source of truth throughout this whole process for us.
Mr. Brown, I want to just speak, like you said before we begin, you wanted to thank some folks, and I think you only had about 10 seconds when I started asking that question. So I just.
That was a fast 3 minutes.
Yes.
So with that, any questions you may have, I'd be more than happy to answer.
All right, Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. You just heard a local business owner discuss that, and we've gone through security issues before with this type of business, and one of our main tasks here as City Council people is to maintain safety and security for our residents. To what extent have you reached out to the local businesses and to use that to help formulate what your security plan is in order to provide assurances to local business? For example, they're 24/7 next to you, their employees are going to be safe. Some type of outreach, have you done any of that?
Not formally in regards to our security plan, simply because it's something that we want to keep close to our chests. We will be doing a lot of community outreach if and when we are given the permit to do so. We do have, as I've mentioned, a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps as well as a police officer that is designing our security procedures. We did a walkthrough through the facility a couple of weeks ago with Police Lieutenant Steele and Fire Marshal Johnson, where we went through all kinds of details and aspects of our security plan. Both gentlemen were very impressed with the plan that Keith had put forward and feel very confident that it is a very secure and very safe plan, not only for our employees, but also the community surrounding us. We'd be more than happy to discuss any issues or concerns that local residents may have about the facility.
All right, yeah, I just don't know, is that part of the plan to make sure that happens?
If we could have our police department work with the business owner and talk about the security plans. I know that you want to keep a lot of this confidential, and that's understandable, but in terms of the relationship between your business and the fence line, I think maybe that would make sense to have a direct conversation with them.
Yep.
And we can facilitate that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, and although United Bakery may not be the world-renowned expert in cannabis facility security plans, nobody knows Del Monte Street better, right, or Front Street, or the areas that, in that, nobody knows the facts on the ground better than they do as they've continued to expand. So even if you're not sharing your specific plan, consulting with them about their own experience on the ground, I think could
Absolutely.
strengthen it, so. All right, any other questions of?
No questions of the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, then with that, we're going to close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for further question or discussion.
And thank you, just a comment, and this is go to the business owner, because this process we've seen a few times, obviously, and how the city has gone about approaching these businesses and making sure we address things like security and science. So we do have a development agreement that's what we're approving tonight with, or at least starting the process to approve it, so that we can make sure it's clear our expectations as a city, that security signage or lack thereof, and other precautions go into the development of these facilities. It's important. We heard from constituents that the previous neighbors that were the previous the previous facilities we approved. But I just want to make sure that you understood that's part of what's going on here, is that we're making sure the city manager and the staff have worked with them to ensure that the city's the applicant addresses these issues with us. So again, I know they have security plans that, they don't want to make public, and that is understandable, but it is important that the neighbors and the neighboring businesses who, there's still it's a bad pun, built cloud over this over this industry as it comes into neighborhoods, and I think it's an incumbent upon you. You're all coming forward. You're all seem professional. You've worked with our city very diligently. Thank the staff for their diligent work on this. But it's incumbent that we talk to neighbors to sort of cut through that and making sure everybody understands as a business what we're looking at, what we've required, and what you're willing to do is to the extent you can. It's important. These folks have made their living here and have grown here, and they're important to us as well. So I want to make sure that they have that opportunity.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So I'm supportive of moving this forward, but with that understanding, and in part because we've either designed these regulations and security plans to do their job, or we haven't. I mean, there's not an acceptable level of security incidents and crime and other sorts of things that we are building into this, and so. And it's why we began with one, and then we're moving forward deliberately. We haven't opened up the door without any kind of controls because we're learning as we go along. But so far we have had no challenges. So the Planning Commission has again asked us questions about this topic. So I just want to provide my own feedback on these issues, which is, they've asked us, should there be a cap on the amount of cannabis businesses allowed, and is there a concentration in one area of the city? Should that be a factor in our decisions? And this gets back to the same issue. If we were talking about liquor stores, where we and everywhere else in the world have a history of issues that you can control, you can minimize, you can have great actors, but you can have bad actors. Those issues and they have impacts in the neighborhood in terms of folks drunk outside of the liquor store, folks drinking too much in the neighborhood, right? So that they have impacts. So we have laws that prohibit overconcentration, and if West Sacramento allowed the retail sale or distribution of marijuana, we would almost certainly have exactly those same rules and procedures, but we don't allow that. And there's no active proposal to begin allowing retail sales in the city. So we're talking exclusively about distribution, but not distribution at the individual retail level, but distribution, on trucks and elsewhere to other places, and to manufacturing and to extraction and to research. Those are not functions that cause any issues related to concentration. So in the same way that we don't regulate the number of warehouses that can be used to store lumber or any other product, we would have no rational basis by which to have a concentration ordinance about cannabis distribution. So I think the answer for the Planning Commission, and I know they've asked us these questions a few times, is that if there's an issue with our regulatory scheme, that they're concerned we're not providing sufficient protections, then we ought to get at that. But it's not a question of concentration or a cap on the total number. Even this larger question about the potential displacement of other businesses by cannabis, that's again, it's in some ways it's very similar, right? If 6 ice cream stores open up in town, we don't meet every time to say, okay, no, the 7th one, no, it's not allowed. We don't exercise that level of Soviet control over our economy and people who have the businesses, and we can't. Now, if the data were coming back and we were saying, oh my God, there's nowhere for a new business to open in any other sector in our city, then we would need to take a look at the issue, but we're not at that point, since our current population of cannabis-related commercial enterprises is 1. So we don't have an overconcentration, and we don't have a challenge in terms of commercial space being unavailable for other purposes. So I think it will expedite things if it's clear for the Planning Commission kind of what the council's policy framework has been, and that they've been an active part of crafting together with us in order to advance this. But I think once you recall that we are an industrial city, we have been for a century, and that we are not in the retail business, many of these questions become simpler. So, all right. So, is there any further discussion on this item? Nope. Then is there a motion?
I'll move the recommended action.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
I'll second.
All right.
Yep.
And thank you. Then all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks to the applicant. For me, if you notice any issues or problems, you will let us know for sure. All right, then thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. I know how hard I know how busy United Baker is. Thank you for being here tonight. All right.
I'm just concerned, what we're doing, and we want to make the city West Sacramento proud.
You always have. Let's keep at it. All right, thank you. Item 19 then is a public hearing and first reading of ordinances 18-5, 18-6, and 18-7 regarding development agreements for a proposed wholesale cannabis logistics, distribution, transportation, cannabis manufacturing, and commercial indoor cannabis cultivation facility at 2505 Front Street, Suite B. Mr. Laffey.
Yes, this item is very similar to the previous item. The applicant is requesting to operate approximately 29,000 square foot facility in an existing one-story building in the light industrial zone at 2505 Front Street, Suite B. The applicant is proposing to use the facility for commercial cannabis indoor cultivation, cannabis manufacturing, and wholesale cannabis logistics, distribution, and transportation. While in the same building as the previous item considered tonight, this is a separate business from the previous item. The municipal code allows for these three uses in the light industrial zone with approval of a CUP by the Planning Commission and a development agreement by City Council. And like the last item, the development agreements for your consideration tonight include many provisions, and many of which have been included in previous development agreements. A few notable provisions: the business can't have any exterior signage on the building or on the vehicles. A safety and security plan must be provided and approved by the police department prior to operation. And the business is required to pay the city 5% of gross receipts from operations, between $0 and $50 million for the manufacturing and indoor cultivation, and 2.5% of the distribution, gross receipts from distribution. The Planning Commission considered this item at the April 5th meeting and approved the CUPs and resolutions 18-2, 18-3, and 18-4 PC, recommending that the council adopt ordinance 18-5, 18-6, and 18-7 to approve the development agreements. This item before you tonight is very similar to the previous cannabis-related items that come before you tonight and previously. This concludes my remarks. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here as well.
All right, thank you, Seamus. All right, with that, we'll open the public hearing then on item 19. We have one request to speak, and that's by Kara Busow.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm Kara Brusso. I'm the Operations Manager of WCC Management, LLC. I'd like to briefly introduce some key members of our operations team that are not listed on our statement of justification, and to express all of our appreciation for the opportunity to enter into a development agreement with the City of West Sacramento. I would like to thank Seamus for all of his support, Seamus for all of his support and guidance throughout the process, and Lieutenant Steele and Fire Marshal Johnson for working with us through our security and safety plans. I also would like to note that prior to applying for a cannabis distribution and cultivation and manufacturing CUP with the city, WCC Management has been operating as a collective under the former Attorney General's guidelines for almost 10 years. Throughout our years of operation, we have assembled a highly qualified team that use their professional experiences in a variety of other industries to develop our operating procedures with safety and security at the very forefront. I'm responsible for managing the day-to-day operations. I have over 15 years of business management experience that were developed during my time as the general manager of a publicly traded industrial supplier. During the last decade, I have specifically offered consulting services to small to medium-sized businesses in the service and manufacturing industries, analyzing all aspects of operations and recommending strategies to reduce operating costs, increase efficiencies, and revenues. I have worked very diligently at WCC Management to create and document standard operating procedures for all aspects of the business, including inventory procurement, quality controls, employee training, and accountability. Moving forward, I will serve as the compliance officer for our operations, ensuring that we are within the Cal-OSHA guidelines and the guidelines of the Bureau of Cannabis Control. Wow, that was quick. I'm about halfway through. I can answer any questions that you may have.
Madam Clerk, did you say that was the correct time?
That was not.
It was not, okay. Do you have an idea what the correct time is then? Okay. So do you want to?
Perfect.
Can you restore half the time then? Thank you.
Thank you. Keith Higgins is going to be the Director of Security for the entire building at 2505 Front Street. He was introduced by the prior presenters, and so everything with that stands. Robert is here with us. He's our head of manufacturing. He's an ASC certified master technician that brings over 30 years of management and mechanical expertise to our team. He's worked in design, fabrication, and testing in a variety of industries, where his mechanical acumen is a result of his dedication to build safe machinery where there's zero room for error. He's used these skills to establish our volatile extraction standard operating procedures. His mechanical aptitude has been displayed during his decades of experience. He's currently working with a certified industrial hygienist to design the manufacturing facility with the appropriate engineering controls to mitigate any hazards, along with the administrative controls and management programs required to reduce any worker exposure to any hazards. Our team has retained the services of DGA Architects, who is based out of Sacramento and is one of the country's foremost architectural firms specializing in the design of technical buildings. Our principal and senior project manager has worked on 8 cannabis-related projects in the past few years, ranging from 3,000 square feet to 21,000 square feet. They're very familiar with the city's planning department, and we're confident they're the best team for the job. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have about our business model and operations. We look forward to building our business and becoming part of the West Sacramento community and using our West Sacramento First strategy for hiring and educating within the community.
All right, thank you. Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, just, I'd like to incorporate the comments that we made on the last agenda item on the security and outreach to the city, and it looks like there'll be a conversation that will happen to make sure that the local businesses are informed of what you're doing, and you can listen to them and as well as to their security concerns when you're developing your plan.
Just a quick note, that's something that we've actually discussed. We feel it's important that our neighbors feel comfortable and safe. We have not initiated that yet. We didn't want to be presumptuous, but that is part of our plan.
Great, thank you.
Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions, and again, just set the framework is a lot of those same controls are here, but this one's a little different because it's indoor cultivation. And one of the areas that because it's come up before, can you in your letter of justification, you bring out the noxious chemical control, and I think that's one of the concerns the community will have around when it gets to indoor cultivation is how we contain smells, right, and noxious.
Absolutely.
So are there standards in this industry that you are required to meet? What's the framework that you have that you say you're going to have a plan. I'm just wondering what's the plan kind of driven by? What's the framework for that?
We will have a closed-loop HVAC system with full filtration systems, and we are working with a certified industrial hygienist who will be making sure that we do meet all of the standards that are set forth.
All the standards set by whom is kind of my question. Who are those standards set by?
Rob?
The state actually, when you file, I'm the general attorney for WCC Management.
Since we're in a hearing, if you could come to the microphone for the record. Yeah.
Craig Wasserman, General Counsel for WCC Management. When we file our paperwork for the state license after we're given the city permit, you have to have an industrial hygienist. And there's only a few actually in the country that you can work with for the volatile extraction labs. And they go through a set of, it's over my head, of what the industrial hygienist does. I'd never even heard of what that was before this. And that's required to get your state permit, and it's very extensive and thorough, that they go through safety and standard of whatever it is that they're governed by. And if it doesn't meet that standard, we're not going to ultimately get a state permit, which is our ultimate goal. That's why we've enlisted one of the best industrial hygienists there are to work with our team.
Right, and thank you for that answer, because I think we had this debate on a facility we looked at earlier, and it wasn't quite clear. It isn't our job to set those standards, so we have to take what you have in here. It's just that part hasn't been clear, and I think even at the last hearing, I had asked the then applicant and staff to maybe find ways to understand that better so that staff can ask those questions should another one come through, whatever. So again,
I took a look at one of the industrial hygienist reports, and you have to be a chemist to understand it, almost, or what they make you go through in order to be safe and secure with the chemicals that are used in the process.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Then we're going to close the public hearing. Yeah, thanks for thank you for the questions, and maybe we can get a bit more information about this going forward. My understanding is there are, whatever the state standards are, there are two other critical areas of standards that do apply. One is ours. It is a public nuisance to create odor that will infiltrate other people's property or the sidewalk or elsewhere. So that is a city level standard that simply meeting the hygienist requirements will not satisfy. Second is the Yolo-Solano County, the Yolo-Solano Air Quality Management District, particularly as it addresses volatile organic compounds, in which Mr. Johannesson is our representative on, as well, which has their own set of standards around those issues. And so if we can get some clarity going forward from this and other applicants around their awareness of and their procedures for complying with both the local and the regional requirements.
If I may, Seamus may have this answer, but we've had a lot of discussion about the emissions of odors from these and not tolerating it. Isn't that in the DA?
Yeah, that's correct. It's in the DA, and it's also in the municipal code. Section 17.42.010 addresses commercial cannabis. And for the manufacturing and for the indoor commercial cultivation, the facility is required to have a ventilation and filtration system installed that prevents cannabis plant odors from exiting the exterior of the facility. So when the applicant eventually submits for the building permit, our staff at the building department would be reviewing the filtration, the mechanical, how the air gets moved in and out, and what kind of filters are being used.
And do the hygienist reports come to you as well, or? Because the fundamental issue ultimately is the public nuisance, for us, public nuisance, and for the Air District, the volatile organic compounds. So if they didn't get it right, even if we signed up on the building permit, if that did not do its job, it did not do the job sufficiently, and there were odors, how would, what are the mechanisms in place to assure that gets seen and then gets corrected?
Yeah, there is an annual review of the development agreement, but there also is a provision in there that at any time the party
So I think the answer to your question is a couple of things. One would be the annual review process. Second is, as you've indicated, a failure to comply with that standard would be a nuisance, could be abated through nuisance. Also, because these are incorporated into the use permit and the development agreement, the ultimate recourse would be a hearing to revoke the use permit or to terminate the development agreement. We would hope it would never reach that point, but that's the ultimate hammer that you have if their system does not achieve the requirements in your municipal code and in the use permit and DA.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. My only question though was, how would we know? I mean, unless there was a complaint from someone else. Right. If we have a noise standard that also protects against a nuisance complaint, but we would, at a concert at Rayleigh Field, and we require Rayleigh Field to, conduct some monitoring of noise. So in addition to making sure that that they've set up the speakers properly and the volume is only set to a certain level, they have to conduct some monitoring. Or if we had TVD Fest, same thing. But in this case, is there any monitoring of any actual odors or escape of volatile compounds? And by volatile compounds, I mean, we're not meaning explosive. We're talking about the things that make odors, basically.
Yeah, we're not monitoring any odors, like on a daily basis. We're dependent on complaints.
Mr. Johannes?
Yeah, I'm not sure if the Air Quality Management District do you have to get the permit through the Air Quality Management District? I know volatile organic compounds are one of the things that are regulated. And if you're an emitter, you're on a list with Air Quality Management, and they will have people come out and check. So maybe we're.
Well, perhaps you could, yeah, maybe if you could just follow up with us with some background on that. My only concern was because the applicant didn't even note that those were two standards to be met, that the chances that they would be met might be somewhat reduced. So it'd be in everyone's best interest, both the applicant, these two current applicants and the ones we've heard previously, to be fully aware, and also for us to be fully aware what those standards and what our own requirements, and then also, as Mr. Johansson said, what the air district requires, so. Yeah. Okay, any further discussion? Or motion?
With that additional feedback incorporated, I'll make the motion to approve the item.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Seeing no further debate, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. That brings us to item 20, which has nothing to do with cannabis, and that is a public hearing and first reading of ordinance 18-8 regarding proposed amendments to the Stone Lock Development Agreement.
Good evening, Mayor Baldwin and members of the council. So tonight, we're here before you with a development agreement request from the port. They have asked for this development agreement specific to the Stone Lock 1, which the slide just came up, to one, more clearly define the actual Stone Lock Phase 1 developable site area. Also to allow for its standalone development separate from the rest of the Stone Lock property, which is to the east. And also to provide more certainty for potential developers as far as what some of the requirements might be, and maybe move some of those out of the way. And I'll get into those a little bit further. So the Stone Lock Phase 1 site is shown up here on the slide. This is Jefferson Boulevard to orient those that are watching from home. So it's west of Jefferson Boulevard, south of the Barge Canal, and east of the Palmadesi Bridge, and north of the Arlington Oaks neighborhood. So it's essentially this area here that we're talking about that is Phase 1 of Stone Lock. So the agreement essentially provides for land dedications from the port to the city. All the property is currently owned by the port. The city only has one easement, and that is the easement for the water booster pump station over in this area shown in purple. There's several dedications that would come to the city. One is for the trail that exists as a dirt path right now. Also for the parking area, that would be coming to the city. And then also the Arlington Oaks Park site, which is here in the black hatch, that came out of the Westbridge Plaza development. What we're proposing to do there is to actually, the port has asked, where'd my arrow go? The port has asked if it can be moved and dedicated to the city, and so the green hatching shows the location that they're proposing that it actually be adjusted and dedicated. And so it actually will be a little bit larger than the 3.8 acres that was originally contemplated with the Southport Framework Plan. And so with these dedications, the agreement provides for proceeds from the sale of the land by the port, 80% of the net proceeds to flow to the city to help advance for some of these public improvements that the port would like to see be done in the next year or so. And also to pay off the loan that was given to the port to acquire the property, and that loan is $2.1 million. So the improvements in the agreement that the port is requesting that have some timelines to them is one, after dedication of the land, for improvements of the Barge Canal Trail to be advanced within 1 year of the effective date of the DA. And the reason for that is we have an opportunity through an encroachment permit to get the Barge Canal Trail built, and it also helps define the flood protection setback for the development. And that was one of the uncertainties that was before development a couple of years ago. And then the second is the Arlington Park, the actual construction. The port is asking that in the development agreement that it be initiated, construction just be initiated 1 year after receipt of the sale proceeds. The barge canal would have to move forward within 1 year, whether or not a sale occurred, and there's a term in the development agreement that talks about how the city and the port would cost share to advance that improvement, and it's just a little under $1 million. And then also, other terms in the development agreement is the provision for Locks Drive West. It's been defined and confirmed as a local roadway, and that would be required when development occurs. And I have a slide that shows that alignment. So it may vary from what's shown here, but the main point of this slide is to show that it's local and it's connecting at Jefferson Boulevard at the signal, at the barge canal access point, and then it will traverse across, working with development, but getting over here and then curving down and connecting to the existing roadway that passes through West Ridge Plaza. The agreement also provides for development fee vesting for a 3-year period. That's another uncertainty that development faces, so the port has asked that. And then also the agreement provides for tree preservation along the southern property line of the Stonelock Phase 1, which is on the border with the Arlington Oaks neighborhood north subdivision boundary. An item that came up at the Port Commission and has been past discussions, there are provisions that have been added and clarified, and the agenda report noted the actual sections, but termination abilities by both party in the event that either the sale does not occur and or the sale doesn't provide enough proceeds to cover some of the required improvements. So benefits to the city. Right now, this would provide land actually transferred to the city in fee title at no cost, but with some improvement provisions. And then also it provides for a mechanism that would allow advance funding for the public park that I know some of the community has been waiting for, and then also for enhanced trail improvements to the existing trail that's already being used, but this would help it to be bettered. And then also the city retains all discretionary review rights over any development that may occur there. So the Planning Commission took this item up on April 24th. They did recommend approval via Ordinance Resolution 18-5 PC. And Mr. Toft, the Port Business Manager, is here this evening if there are questions for the applicant, AKA the Port. That concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you. Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, Charlene, on the, it's kind of a side issue on the connection of the trail. Over the years, we've talked about how to get underneath Jefferson. And I see the trail kind of butts up against her. There's a cross right at the intersection where the light is, but the one that actually follows Barge Canal. What is the status of that? I know we talked about having a tunnel under or a lot of different permutations, but what is the status on that?
I know it's being looked at through the overall Pioneer Bluff and Stonelock master planning effort that Economic Development, Housing, and the Port have been undertaking. I know there are challenges potentially with underground infrastructure for going under, but there are also other challenges for doing an elevated bridge over the top as well. So I don't have an exact status update on either of the options that we're looking at.
Okay.
But I know it is being looked at,
All right.
various options.
All right, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Thank you. I do appreciate in the agreement and the plan, it has become more of an amenity than ever, the access to the canal for rowing clubs and for fishermen and just people walking and having access to it. So the space that's dedicated on the northwest corner, is that right? On
Let me go
along
back to that
Jefferson,
slide.
that's,
Whoops. There we go.
is that right? So where the parking lot is into, I think that's north of that, right? That's all,
About this triangular.
yeah,
area
so
here.
is that all part of this, or is that outside? Yeah, I think that has to do with some of what Councilmember Johannes was just saying, where access underneath, I know that was contemplated, that is being looked at, but
I know we have looked at, again, through the master planning, as that being a potential public amenity, potential facility, structure there that is more water-oriented, but I can't remember if that's going to be dedicated to the city at this point in time, or if it's going to come through the actual development proposal.
and so it's not part of this development agreement per se, it's just more the Stone Lock 1 in blue and keeping the dedication of the Arlington Oaks Park area, moving that and dedicating that. Is that right?
I'm double checking this one section, because it might be part of the boat ramp improvements.
The applicant's behind you, too.
Yeah, I thought I heard the applicant coming in. So the port might be able to answer that question more directly.
Sure, I've been working on this a little more extensively than Charlene, so I have a little more familiarity. So the triangle piece that you pointed out is not part of the development agreement. However, what's shown in orange there, and the purple dot, that's the actual boat ramp. The orange area will likely get expanded. That will be designed in conjunction with the development project, so that parking area will be improved, and the land required for that improvement would be dedicated to the city. But the triangle fronting Jefferson is not part of the DA. It is contemplated to eventually be some sort of a public, a community center or something to that effect.
Okay. And to your point, Charlene, this will follow our standard processes for review, be it Planning Commission or us, where necessary, or design
Yes.
review by your
Yeah,
group.
if the development comes in and needs any sort of mapping, tentative mapping, we go through that process with the Planning Commission. Similarly with design review, whether, if it's any sort of commercial building in there, it would go through the design review process. If it's residential in nature, it'll go through the model plan process.
Yeah, and then just knowing a little bit about where the Port Board Commission has directed their staff. I know that board understands the importance of this parcel and having access to the riverfront, so that's why I'm agreeable as well. So, thank you.
Yeah, so just the financial structure of it. So the port owes the city $2 million and some change. They would be repaying us, but then by agreement, we would be agreeing to spend the money on their property in ways that they have defined in this agreement? And is that?
Yes, that is what they are asking, that we reinvest it in this area of Stone Lock in at least two components of the public facility that's already being used by the public.
So how, and what is the advantage to the city of constraining our use of those dollars? Like if I wrote a note on my mortgage check to Wells Fargo every month, here's my $2,000, and of which I would like you to spend $400 improving my porch or something. I mean, under why should the city, as the lender of those dollars, be allowing the port to direct how we spend the repayment, essentially?
I completely understand. It is a complete discretion on the part of the city to say whether or not they're willing to do that. I would just note that it appears to benefit the city by improving some public spaces that our public is already using, that's being used beyond the Stone Lock property. And also that we get some of the parcels that we don't currently have fee title. The port could turn around and ask us, absent that, if we didn't say reinvest, they could turn around and ask us to purchase the 3.8 acres or whatever park area we need in the trail area that we need. So there could be some cost to us associated for acquisition of land. And then we also have the added benefit of getting the setback defined, not only for the developer, but also for the city with respect to what the Central Valley Flood Protection Board is willing to allow. And that trail improvement also would provide a better opportunity for flood fighting should that need occur along the Barge Canal.
All right, those are all useful things, so thank you. I mean, it also is the case that the port and the city have an important integrated relationship. I mean, that's what's envisioned under state law. It's why the legislature specifically said, City of West Sacramento, your mayor and council should be the port commission, basically, and why at various points in our history and certainly various points in our future, we're going to be making allowances for each other because we're trying to advance critical projects together. So we can't evaluate each transaction solely on the basis of that transaction, but as accumulation of joint investments that we're making to try to power economic prosperity in the community, but also to create real public amenities like this. So appreciate the background. So thank you.
I would quickly note that the port has been making interest payments on the $2.1 million. So I have that information if you're interested.
All right. All right, thank you. Then with that, we're going to open the public hearing on item 20, and we do have a couple of requests to speak on that. The first is by Pat Flames. And Pat will be followed by Laura Jameson and then Danny Langford.
Thank you. Okay, I'm the one that brought up the conflict of interest at the Planning Commission. I still think there's a huge conflict of interest. The board being the same governance as the city council is the same as the port. So therefore, you guys make the decisions for the port, and the port actually belongs or is managed by the city, if I'm getting this correct. And then it's going to benefit you monetarily, even though you, the city, are using the port as a land holding company. You loan them the money to purchase the land from you, so now the port owes you the money back and you want 80% of it for infrastructure or whatever else, trails, whatever else you're going to use it for. So I have a real problem with the same attorney representing both entities when monetarily it's going to benefit the city. I think that's a huge conflict of interest. And then in 13.1, it is understood that the contractual relationship between the city and the landowner, which is the port, is such that the landowner, the port, is an independent contractor and not the agent of the city, and nothing herein shall be construed to the contrary. Well, how can that be if you're governing both entities? 13.2, the city and the landowner, meaning the port, agree nothing contained herein or any document executed in connection herewith shall be construed as making landowner, which is the port, and the city joint ventures or partners. Yet, it's all convoluted. And then attorney fees, this one I really like, Mr. Mitchell, because if one decides to sue the other, who are you going to represent? So I'm not against the plan, I'm against the way it's governed and that you have the same attorney for both entities.
All right, Laura Jameson, and followed by Danny Langford.
Good evening. I have 5 comments, and my first comment's basically the same as Pat's. I think there's a conflict of interest. It seems a little shady to me that the city's lawyer is the port's lawyer and the city manager is the port CEO. So the second comment is I disagree with section 8.1.2 of the agreement, which requires land to be donated from the port to the city at no cost to the city. I think it's a little bit of a conflict of interest that the city is siphoning off the port's land at no cost to the city. Number 3 is I disagree with the use of the term landowner in many sections of the agreement. For example, sections 8.2, 8.3, and much of section 10, the landowner is required to make many improvements, but then again, the port is defined as the landowner. I would recommend that the development agreement be refined to reference a future developer and not the landowner, AKA the port. Number 4 is I disagree with section 9.2.1 of the development agreement, which requires the port to pay for half of the cost of the improvements to the Barge Canal Trail if the property is not sold within 1 year. The port should not be in the business of paying for city trails, especially at a cost of $500,000 per an item from tonight's Port Commission meeting. In the proposed scenario, if the land does not sell, I am dubious of the port actually getting repaid. And number 5, I disagree with section 9.2.5 of the agreement, which requires the port give the city an additional funding up to $25,000 to clean up the land that the port is donating to the city. If the city's getting the money free of charge, the city can pay to have it cleaned up, not the port. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Dana Langford?
Good evening. I completely agree with what the ladies have said before me. And I want to say the concepts that were presented at last night's open house for the redevelopment there is amazing. Think it's great. But I agree. It would seem when you say the port is asking, but you guys all sit on the board. And the whole added attorney, it looks very convoluted. And if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's a duck. Just my opinion. I'm so bothered by so many things. And watching you interact with other people tonight, it's amazing how rude you've been to so many other people that come before you, such as myself, over the years. And, we can't speak on public comment, but you had so much dialogue at public comment. Sorry, I know this is off topic, but I'm just so frustrated after sitting here all night watching this and after watching the last meeting ad nauseum on live feed. Anyway, I've lost track of thoughts, sorry. I disagree with how the port is being handled too, just like they said. It makes no sense. We're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul again. It makes no sense, and the port's going to end up on the short end of the deal. I'm all for certain city improvements, but not at the cost of the port. We've done enough damage to our port as it is. And how much of this is still Homeland Security part of? Because they used to be such a part of it, especially with the ammonia tanks so close. Is that all factor into the development and the monies that are being used? And that 80% proceeds is very alarming to several of us, a lot of us in the community, not that are all here, and I know you look at me as just one person, or the three of us is just a small handful of people, as you've alluded to tonight, Mr. Mayor, but there's so many other people that are bothered by these things, and I think you need to start really listening to the entire community, not just the people that are saying things you want to hear. But this whole thing with the port is very disturbing, and it looks very convoluted. And you can say the one thing, but you're sitting on the commission of the port, but yet you're the city council. Makes no sense. Thank you.
All right, with that concludes all the testimony. So we're going to close the public hearing on item 20 and return it to the council. Let me just, for a little bit of history, for most of the Port District is a state agency established by state law back in the 1950s. For the vast majority of its history, for 40 plus years, it was governed by this commission, but with a different composition. That commission being appointed 2 representatives of the city of Sacramento, 2 representatives of the county of Sacramento, 1 representative of Yolo County, and then when Cindy Tuttle became a city council member, they fought to get a seat on this port commission, to get 1 seat. It was a fully independent port commission that did not give a damn about the city of West Sacramento, and their actions showed it. All it cared about was the port. Let's just bring in more smokestacks and more trucks and just, we don't care what the city's plan is. And so in its wisdom, the legislature at our proposal, but at legislation introduced by Helen Thompson from Davis, our Assemblywoman, and Mike Machado, our Senator, jointly introduced legislation that said that had to come to an end. The port was about to go bankrupt because it didn't have the support of the residents here, because it kept approving bad projects that were endangered public health in our community. And so the port was about to go bankrupt. And the city was angry because the port was making bad decisions, what might have made sense for Sacramento and Sacramento County, but were bad for the city of West Sacramento. So the legislature passed a law that said that the city of West Sacramento shall appoint 80% of the port commission. 4 of the 5 port commissioners must be appointed by the city of West Sacramento, and by the mayor, approved by the city council, and 1 from Yolo County. And the legislature insisted, at the request of the International Longshoremen and Warehousemen's Union, the legislature insisted that as they did that we would agree to appoint city council members to that commission, so that there would be a close alignment between the objectives and the actions of the port and the city. So it was entirely by design of the legislation that was passed by the legislature and signed by some governor a decade ago, that was intended to align very closely the actions of both. It was as a result that the port was able to exit bankruptcy, because in the most critical moments that the port was about to have to shut down, it was the city that made low-interest loans. It was the city that agreed to buy properties that no one else would have bought in order to loan money to the port in order to stay afloat. Repeatedly, and we only did that because we knew that ultimately we had a long-term alignment between the 2 agencies. And so, as I said earlier, the port and the city don't make each transaction as though we are at odds like we used to back when the port was controlled by folks from outside the city. We do collaborate because that's what's in the interest of the residents of the city. The port itself has a very specific mission in state law, not just to promote commerce, but also to promote open space and recreation. That's why the port dedicated the land for the barge canal access area that exists today, and for the trail and for the fishing access. So the trail that's envisioned in this plan is not a demand of the city against the port. It is part of the port accomplishing the mission that was established for it in state law that it never did for 40 years when the port was under the control of Sacramento City and County. So this potential agreement, at least, is the result of a series of victories that the community has won in order to wrestle control of what was being operated essentially as a colonial government by folks in Sacramento City and Sacramento County. And this is exactly the sort of joint benefit that was intended to be created. So I think structurally this is the right move. I supported it in the Port Commission. I had some of the same questions I had tonight about the values to the city, but it does make sense for both for this area, but for the Stone Lock 2, for the Pioneer Bluffs area, and for the remaining parts of Southport, that we get this project right. And I do think for the city in particular, we have to understand tonight, and we do understand, it's why the language references landowner, not the port, that the port is acting in this case as a developer in the it's kind of hard to say it this way, in the pure sense of that word, in the sense that the port is not intending to go out and start doing construction itself. The port will be at some point, and the city in cooperation, will be finding through another developer to actually do the project. And so it's very important that we think about this agreement as being between the city and some future private developer. And that we don't cut corners in the development agreement because we think, but it's the port, and therefore we can count on that partnership into the future. It's very critical that this development agreement be written in all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed in a way that it provides all the accountability that we will require of whichever private sector developer moves forward with the actual construction of the project. And I know both staff from both the port, but especially in this case, the Community Development Department and the Planning Commission have worked really hard to accomplish that and to make sure that that this agreement meets that test of accountability for the city and for our residents. So I'm supportive of it moving forward, and I want to thank both community development and the port staff, and Rick in particular, for a lot of work to come up with a creative solution that advances both the needs of the neighborhood and the viability of the port and the future development patterns of all of Southport and the city, and develop some, and advance some key recreational amenities that otherwise would be years down the line as a result. All right, other discussion?
No. I'll make the motion to approve the recommended action.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Item 21 is a public hearing to consider objections to the proposed removal of weeds. Mr. Johnson of cannabis fame. We've heard you reference about cannabis 4 or 5 times tonight, so welcome on something else, a different kind of weed.
Good grief.
Is this on? Oh, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. On April 11th of this year, council adopted Resolution 1816, which kicked off the weed abatement season. Notices were mailed to about 1,000 residents or property owners within the city who have or may have had weed issues on their property. Tonight, we respectfully recommend this council to open a public hearing to hear objections and or comments on those notices, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions at this time? All right, thank you, Fire Marshal. With that, then, we'll open the public hearing on item 21. Does anyone wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing on item 21, return to the council.
All right, there's no objections, so.
We've received no objections, written or otherwise, so.
All right.
The staff is asking for direction to proceed with the 2018 weed abatement program.
I'll move the recommended action.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Item 22 is, thank you, Fire Marshal Johnson. Item 22 is public hearing and consideration of Resolution 18-24, amending the City of West Sacramento book of fees for residential parking permits. As I've noted earlier, the city manager has requested that we continue this item to a future meeting and made the offer to Polly, but I think she's left. So, okay. So if there's no objection, then that'll be the order, and we'll continue that item to a future meeting.
Move to continue that to the next meeting.
May 23rd?
May 23rd.
Oh, to May 23rd. Okay, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll move it.
Okay.
Move.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Item 23 is presentation and discussion of proposed midterm adjustments to the city's adopted 2-year budget ending June 30th, 2019. Mr. Sharma, or Ms. Raper.
Hi, good evening. City Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm sitting over here today because I was injured preparing myself for May as Bike Month last week, unfortunately. So tonight we're talking about the midterm budget. The City Council adopted the 2-year budget on June 14th, 2017. Tonight we're going to provide an update on our fiscal year activity for the current year and proposed adjustments to the budget for the next fiscal year. Because this is a midterm, adjustments are limited to necessary changes that were unknown or unanticipated at the time of the original adoption of the budget. So details are included in the agenda report. In fact, there's a lot of work that went into this. I'm just going to briefly highlight some of the proposals for you in this presentation, and then we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. All of the departments and the Administrative Services Department staff, in particular Nitish Sharma and Paul Bloomberg, have done a tremendous job in this effort. There's a lot of information in the agenda reports, and it was all pulled together in a fairly short period of time. And I've been very impressed by the efforts of everyone involved. It really was a team effort, and my first sort of interaction with folks here and looking at the budget here for the city. So. And as I said, I will answer any questions that I can, but we've also got everybody, the experts in the audience, if you've got any specific questions. So as this is a workshop, we're requesting your feedback and direction on the proposed adjustments, and we plan to return to council for action at the next meeting on May 23rd. So what you're going to see in this presentation is that there are limited items included in the proposed adjustments. There's sufficient capacity in the funds to support the requests for fiscal year 2018-19. General fund revenues are conservatively estimated. In the short term, finances look good. We do have some longer term issues that we're going to touch on briefly, and we've got plans to work on longer term solutions to those issues as part of the next 2-year budget cycle, or in preparation for the next 2-year budget cycle. One of the things that you'll notice is overall we've kind of postponed one-off changes to positions or compensation, and instead are looking to do a global review of the organization and compensation to propose a strategy for addressing any gaps there are. But there are a couple of position requests that are included in this, and those are things that were identified as very beneficial and have either minimal impact to the budget or even in some cases identify savings for those changes. We also plan to perform revenue audits and do a comprehensive fee study to ensure we're collecting what we're due as far as revenue is concerned. We're looking at benefit options to potentially reduce costs to the city and employees while maintaining similar or better benefits. We're reviewing operations to identify where there might be opportunities for cost savings or improved efficiency. And we're taking a multi-pronged approach over the next year to evaluate both the revenues and expenditures, particularly in the general fund, to gear up for the 2-year budget cycles with a plan to address the long-term issues. So, are you managing that, or do I have that? Okay, thank you. So first, we're going to start with just a brief overview of where we are with the general fund this year. As far as revenues, our property tax assumptions in the adopted budget were 2% increase per year. So far, we're showing closer to a 3% increase for 17-18, which results in increased property tax revenues of a little over $500,000. Increased revenue projection. So for 18-19, we've actually increased our revenue projection for property tax to the 3% number. We've had talks with the county, who is estimating maybe a little bit higher, but given the number of outstanding appeals, we wanted to be a little bit more conservative. So adjusting that to a 3% increase results in about $750,000 in additional revenues in 18-19. Sales tax is projected to be down about $262,000 this year and $266,000 next year, based on taxable sales through December of 2017. That's a result of several factors, including, some closing businesses, increase in online sales, sort of transition as to how sales tax is collected and how people are making purchases. We're working with our consultant on updated budget projections based on the first quarter of this calendar year, and there has shown to be some strong growth, so we might change those as time goes on. However, our consultants have also projected potentially a recession beginning as early as 18-19. That's very difficult to predict, given that the last recession was very different, but we've been on such a long sort of recovery that's just something that we're kind of keeping in the back of our heads and making sure that we're keeping an eye on as things go forward. So other taxes are primarily related to property taxes. It has to do with sort of the non-real property, the VLF, the AB 1290 pass-throughs. So as property taxes are increasing, those are also expected to increase, and we're anticipating about $550,000 above our budgeted numbers for both 17-18 and 18-19. And cannabis revenues are projected here in about $600,000 for 17-18, although our third quarter receipts were a little lower than expected, so we may not meet that number this year. But we have projected the same number going forward to 18-19 in future years until we have a little bit more experience under our belts. I know that you've approved a lot of development agreements. We're waiting for some of those businesses to open up, and so we're kind of watching those numbers and trying to project conservatively. As far as expenditures, excuse me, for 17-18, they closely match projections. The majority of the savings is in personnel costs, and those are one-time related to vacancies during the time it takes to recruit replacements. Our CalPERS pension increases are included in 18-19 and going forward, but will be solidified in the coming months as we work to develop a strategy to address the long-term funding as part of the next biennial budget cycle. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the details on those expenses as we go forward. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the supplemental request for the general fund. There's $132,000 of non-discretionary ongoing cost increases requested as part of the midterm adjustment. Those are increases primarily related to increases in utility costs, increases in costs for network and desktop computer loans, printing and copying costs, and our animal services contracts, things that we don't necessarily have a lot of control over at this point. There is $89,000 requested in ongoing supplemental requests and $842,000 in one-time requests for the general fund. Those include estimates to conduct a comprehensive fee study as well as a compensation study, as mentioned earlier, so we can develop some plans, some long-term sustainable proposals to sort of bridge some of the gaps that we're projecting as we go forward. We're also proposing $300,000 of our surplus be set aside to the budget stabilization reserve to get us to the 17% target, and to set aside funds now to protect the city in case of recession or other significant cost increases, pension, for example. So this slide here just shows the difference between our projections for 17-18 from the adopted budget, or the amended budget, excuse me, and the projections for 18-19 from what you approved a year ago. We previously discussed the changes to the revenue projections, but the result is about $980,000 in additional revenues for 17-18, the current fiscal year. Those ongoing revenue adjustments are included in the proposed adjustments for 18-19. Expenditure projections for 17-18 include MOU changes for completed negotiations and labor savings experienced in the first part of the year for those vacancies. So as a result of the activity for this fiscal year and our projections, we project to see a surplus of about $1.39 million in this fiscal year. And as we mentioned, it's primarily due to the increased revenues and the labor savings. The surplus carries over to 18-19 as one-time funds because we go ahead and update 18-19 for the changes we're seeing this year. Any surplus this year is available to use for a one-time basis. Our 18-19 expenses include increased PERS rates and costs related to completed negotiations, as well as some estimates for some ongoing labor negotiations. And overall, with the proposed adjustments to the general fund, we're projecting a $31,000 ongoing surplus in 18-19 and $540,000 in remaining one-time funds. And those funds are, of course, available for City Council's strategic planning initiatives. This slide just shows the next 4 years, sort of carrying over the projections and the changes from 18-19 and what that does to us for the next 4 years. It also shows that the rising cost of benefits, pension primarily, we could see operating deficits as early as fiscal year 21-22. But I do want to note that our revenues are conservatively projected. This forecast includes the 2% increase in property tax, which we know might come in higher, and cannabis revenues remaining static, which we certainly expect to increase as more businesses come online. So we'll be watching those. And it also sort of includes the almost worst-case scenario for the increase in pension costs. So, and PERS has made some additional changes to their assumptions since we prepared those projections, and so we'll be looking at those closely and kind of digging into them a little bit more as we go forward. As far as, yes?
I'm sorry, just if I can interrupt, where are you accounting for in this, for the CalPERS payments? Is this personnel costs?
That's included in personnel costs.
Okay.
And we've kind of averaged things together. One of the things that we're going to be doing going forward is doing a little bit more of a detailed long-term financial plan, breaking out some of those pieces, pension in particular, so we can really identify what those impacts are going to be and come up with some strategies to address those.
Right, so, and that's what I would like to see, because I think if we just held static, just the costs as we see them, plus this, I think that's, I mean, it would be helpful to see that going into these discussions so that we know, especially 4 years out, the projected impact of that. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll bring that as a separate plan and
Well, let me
update it to
ask
the
a more,
council.
do you mind? Thank you. On the personnel cost then, if you're looking at fiscal year 19-20, what percentage of that is do you have an idea what those CalPERS payments you're projecting to be?
I can tell you that I do have some data on that. Right now, overall in 18-19, the general fund contribution to pensions is about $7 million. And the annual PERS contributions are expected to nearly double in the next 6 years with some of the changes that have been made. So those are definitely things, we've been meeting with PERS to get a little bit more information, to understand some of the changes they're making. You, as a council, adopted a pension stabilization trust last year that we're also looking at sort of developing a strategy for funding that and how we might use that to stabilize our annual impact. But these are certainly things that are on the top of our list to look at. It's a significant expense and growing over the next 6 years.
Just to put a finer grain request is that you break out the PERS payments each year, and also the other, that you mentioned, the labor contract costs and others, so we should be able to see how much our costs are going up because we're adding people.
Yes.
And how much they're going up because we're paying more in any case, but adding people, they are receiving more, or we're paying PERS, I think, are the three big categories.
Absolutely.
And actually, the first one is not a very big category. We're not adding very many people, so that would be useful. And I would just caution this idea that maybe PERS will get better. It never has in any of the prior planning periods. And if you put together your forecasts about a recession coming, PERS investment returns are likely to decline, not grow. And so even what they're doing today is not, even what we've asked them to do today doesn't solve the problem, just pushes it later. And if that happens to coincide with a recession, we can be hit with an extraordinary, well, it's already extraordinary, doubling it, but the problem could get much worse, and it's hard to imagine how it could be actually better over a period that's not 1 or 2 years.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons I think you adopted the Pension Stabilization Trust is it gives you as the city council and us a little bit more control over how funds are invested and not sort of dropping money into PERS and being subject to their decisions and what happens there. So I think we've got some options, and we'll be bringing forward some proposals to you as how we might address those going forward. One of the things to note, as far as PERS increases, the biggest increase for 18-19 is really in public safety. The safety tier 1 plans increased by 6 to 7% of payroll. So for example, police tier 1 went from 33% of payroll to 41% of payroll as far as city contributions, while the second tier in PEPRA and the miscellaneous plans were increased by about 1% or less of payroll. But the combined increase for this year is $1 million impact, and so that is certainly going to be a bigger problem going forward. So I understand your request, and we will definitely respond to that. And as you stated, CalPERS continues to make changes to assumptions which will have significant impact on city finances. There are some other things, there's some other legislation that I've got listed for later that actually is proposing for joint powers authorities that member agencies share in the risk, that they're jointly and severally liable for any obligations, including rising CalPERS costs. That could be a significant impact for us, and so that's also something that we're watching very closely.
Yeah,
so.
and you're going to bring that up later?
Well, I just brought it up, but.
I mean, that's the cumulative effect of this, of not just of that, as well as what we're seeing already. It's just gigantic. I mean, the potential impact of that. So, and I have been asking staff, I think I did, every JPA we're involved with is well, okay, let's just move on. It's just an enormous, I don't know where the wisdom is on that proposed legislation, but.
Yeah, and I don't know, I don't have a good idea as far as its likelihood of moving forward. It's come to light, I think, because of a lot of the issues that some agencies have experienced, including, some JPAs that have gone under. So it's definitely something that we're watching very closely, and it requires us to come up with a plan to address that. So we're working on that. I mentioned the more detailed long-term financial plan that we're working on to kind of break things out and really identify, some of the things I've done in the past is look at some optimistic, most likely, and pessimistic forecasts, give you a range, really kind of highlight all of the things that could happen, and so we can come up with strategies to address those. So we'll be bringing that to you in the next few months to inform the next budget cycle. So before I move to other funds, are there any other questions on that one?
Can you go back to that slide, real fast? I'm sorry.
God, how can you keep looking at that?
Yeah, I know. Never mind. I'll bring it up later. Just go ahead and keep going.
So for other funds, all the funds have sufficient available balance to cover the supplemental requests. The fund balances and details are included in your report, so I'm not going to go over those again, but I did want to note a couple of items. The proposal for the Memorial Park ADA improvements came in about $300,000 over the approved funding available for that project. And there's about a little over $2.5 million in the park impact fee funds set aside in the long-term debt fund that was planned to be utilized toward the annual recreation center lease payment. In line with previous council direction, we planned to propose Measure K revenues to fund the recreation center lease beginning in the next budget cycle. However, there is additional capacity in 1819 in Measure K funds. So we're requesting to utilize $600,000 in ongoing funds available in 1819 toward the recreation center lease payment, freeing up some of the park impact fee funds that were set aside in the long-term debt account. And we're proposing using those for the shortfall for the Memorial Park ADA improvements. For Measure E, excuse me, the Assistant City Manager will be presenting a separate, more detailed report on Measure E. But I did want to draw attention to proposed funding for fiscal year 1819 of the Homeless Coordinator position. There's no question that this is an important position for the city and for the community. The question today is really not about that. It's about what source of funding is appropriate. I know that we had CDBG funds previously pledged to fund this position. Those funds were set to expire in October 2017, and at that time, council authorized the use of Measure E revenues to fund the position for the remainder of the fiscal year. Since then, staff has researched several other grant funding opportunities, finding none that really fit the bill. And with a position like this, a long-term funding solution is necessary. And so that's something that we are committed to identifying a sustainable long-term funding source for this position as part of the next budget cycle. But we are asking that you continue the funding for Measure E for 1819. And it's an impact of just under $120,000. I think there's data that's presented on that in the next item that really shows the impact of that position on homelessness and finding housing for folks in our community. So the road fund is the other item. There are minor requested ongoing adjustments in the road fund totaling about $14,500. And in fact, I think $13,000 of that was an error where we had a typo and missed a zero on the numbers that we were including the last time. The primary source of funding for this fund is gas tax. The report shows that the fund has an operating deficit of about $280,000, and it has for several years a growing deficit as the gas tax revenues have declined. Our new revenues, SB1, and $250,000 annually that we receive from Waste Management have been programmed toward capital needs. We did propose in the report to use that $250,000 to bring the fund positive while we continue to identify options and longer-term strategies, because we know that there's both significant capital needs in that area as well as ongoing operations and maintenance needs. And I was informed prior to this meeting that there is still perhaps some, the Public Works Director has so much in the capital needs that he is not comfortable with the proposal to use that $250,000 towards operations. So I think that's something that we'll definitely need to continue to work towards and come back with another solution as we move forward in this process. So, let's see. I think, oh, here we are. So as I said earlier, as this is a workshop, we're definitely requesting feedback and direction from council. We'll answer any questions you have on the specific budget requests that were included in the report. And we'll be back at the next council meeting, May 23rd, and asking you for some action there. Other key issues, we've kind of touched on these, but of course we've got ongoing labor negotiations for some bargaining groups that could serve to impact some of the projections going forward. The PERS and OPEB unfunded liabilities, the changes in assumptions and projected benefit costs are primary focus for the city for a lot of the reasons that we mentioned earlier, and we're diligently working on strategies for funding those liabilities and mitigating the large impacts to our annual budget. We talked about proposed legislation like AB 1912, that's the JPA one for pension and other liabilities. I know that you're very well aware of, AB 1466 proposed on sales tax. We're watching all of these to see, what happens with them and how they might impact our future funds. And as we develop this more detailed long-term financial plan, that's something that is just a fluid thing, that as these things come up, we can kind of go to the model and see what it's going to be for us. So road fund challenges and opportunities, as just mentioned, we've got a funding issue there that we definitely need to identify a solution for, and so we'll be working with Public Works to do that. We're actively looking for opportunities to increase our existing revenue base and raise new revenues. We'll be auditing our primary revenue sources to ensure that we're getting what we should be getting and looking for opportunities in those areas. Overall, we are seeing increases in some revenues, which is certainly positive. However, our largest expenditure in the general fund is pension, and it's expected to rise significantly over the next several years. So it's still tight. There's not a lot of wiggle room. Fiscal 18-19 is faring better than we expected at the time that you adopted the original budget. But we know that there are several factors that can serve to eat up some of those additional projected revenues. So the theme for today is that we're cautiously optimistic in the short term, but we've got a lot of work to do to really set ourselves up for success in the future, given some of these sort of large outstanding items. So with that, I'd love to get feedback from you and direction as we move forward with these midterm adjustments.
All right, are there questions before we go to public comment? Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, Roberta, can you just bring up that 2018 to 2023 projection again? So this looks like it's going to, starting, in 2021, we're going to have a marginal operating surplus, and after that, we're going into negative territory. And that's based on conservative estimates for cannabis. It's based on sales tax. It looks like there's a little bit of an increase, but we don't really know what the allocation is going to be for online sales. We understand that. But it doesn't consider any recession, right?
It does not. And one of the things as far as sales tax is concerned is that looking at our history, when we do hit a recession, it's expected to hit our revenues by about 6%, $1.5 million as far as sales tax is concerned. One of the things that I also mentioned is we maintained the 2% increase in property tax year to year, and just increasing that projection to 3% in 18-19 gives us another $750,000. So I think we're conservative in some areas, and while we haven't built in a recession, we're hoping that our conservative estimates in other areas will offset that if it happens, but those are things that we're looking into further so that we can come back with a more detailed long-term plan to share with the council as we develop some strategies.
All right, thank you.
Okay, all right, with that, thanks. We'll come back. We're going to pause for public comment, and we have one request to speak on this. This is by Danny Langford. Okay, thanks. All right, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma?
Okay, so the elephant in the room is you brought up, and it's just, I can't emphasize enough around our ability to start really breaking out those potential costs to us. I think, so I think we kind of hit on that enough to understand. We understand it. We've, and first of all, I should have said that welcome. I think this is your first time presenting to us. So welcome. We've met and spent some time with you already around budget issues, and appreciate your style and your exactness of trying to get your arms around the challenges we face, the opportunities we might have. What I'm getting from you is some pathways that you're going to explore and bring back to us, which is critical. As you articulated, we're faced with challenges, not just on the expense side when we get from CalPERS. We're faced, as you mentioned, in labor negotiations, and we're trying to find ways to take care of our team as we manage expenses that we have no control over. So it is daunting. I have every confidence that we will find solutions for, but it's going to take a collective will for us to sort of understand and have realistic expectations around what's going to impact us. So I would ask you to, as you heard tonight, are we being cautious? Are we thinking about a recession? Are we can use nothing more than realism hitting us. Don't sugarcoat things for us, because it just prolongs decisions that we may need to make today. So I appreciate the presentation around that front. So some specifics around the general fund, which is by percentage is starting. We're seeing it being where we pay all of our majority of our personnel costs. True statement. But all of them, most of them.
That's a good question. I know that they are split among a few other funds, but I think the majority of them are in the general fund, including the public safety. Public safety is primarily in general fund.
Right.
Yeah.
And to know, and I know in talking to, we all know that this is kind of having to make those payments on account boards doesn't help us at all. This eats up a percentage of what we can use to actually pay them in cash pay team members in cash dollars. So we're going to have to, in salary, so we're going to have to figure out that solution. The only thing we can control right now is around revenue, and I think that's where Councilmember Johannesson was articulating as our need is, and we can barely communicate that. So I'm going to take it item by item. Property taxes. You do have, I think you said 2 to 3% increases. Lots of appeals. You're being conservative on those assumptions, which I'm fine with. Sales tax are down. That's not unlike other jurisdictions we're seeing across the region. True? Correct?
True. And on sort of a positive note, we'll be meeting with our sales tax consultant, I believe next month, and they'll have some updated numbers. The first quarter of this calendar year showed some improvement, and so there may be some positive news there, but they're down a little bit, and it is statewide.
It's statewide, yeah. And it just, as the new normal sets in about internet sales, you're right. And that's, I think we have been smart not to peg salaries against sales taxes as other jurisdictions have. I think Roseville is the jurisdiction right now facing a huge deficit because sales taxes have dropped. And so they're trying to figure out how to get out of that hole. We haven't done that. But it does worry me that from a revenue standpoint, sales taxes are dropping, and we don't, granted, our sales tax base is different than others because of the business nature of it, but it's just something I want to be cautious of in terms of how we project that out. I'm not saying to be totally, we're not, I'm not saying at all to be super conservative on it, but we got to be realistic about the nature and trends of kind of where sales tax revenue come from. You mentioned also you were going to audit revenue streams or kind of fees. Can you expand upon that, what you have in mind?
Sure. We're actually going through audits of some of our lodging facilities now to look at our TOT revenues. We've built in, and I believe this is the first time in some time we've actually done that. In other agencies I've been in, we've been on a regular rotation where we audit our TOT revenues every 2 to 3 years, where they pick a sample just to make sure that we're collecting what we should be. There have been significant gains in other jurisdictions based on some of those. There's audit of property taxes to make sure that we're getting enough of those. That's usually not an issue because the county's usually very good about that. Audit of our franchise fees. Some of the cable TV companies are some of the worst for perhaps not paying the way the agreements state, but there's potentially some room there. Auditing our cannabis industries to make sure that we're collecting and that they're reporting. A lot of this reporting is sort of on the honor system, and so having a good audit program where we go out and people know that we're serious, that we want to make sure that we're collecting, that a lot of it is education-based too, so that the people who are filling out these tax returns and making these tax payments to us really understand what revenues they receive that they're being taxed on. And so just really looking overall at our primary revenue sources and how we can move forward there to potentially increase those. We already have a firm that does some sales tax discovery. They work on our behalf to make sure that sales taxes are allocated appropriately. And so it's just adding to that where we're looking at all of our revenue sources to make sure that we're collecting what we should be.
Okay. And it sounds like it's just it sounds like it's just like you said, a program that you take upon. You may hire auditor or consultants to come in and help you with it, but it's just kind of an ongoing process that you'll just learn as we go and keep about it. And I would urge you sort of to, again, just prioritize those so that, we kind of look at the bigger areas of, like I said, if franchise fees are an area that historically you've seen in other jurisdictions you've worked at or can be missed, that kind of prioritization is important so that we're kind of getting the most bang for our buck early on. But I thank you for kind of bringing that up. I also want to bring up the issue of, because we brought up our kind of stabilization fund, but also reserves. Where are we kind of by way of reserves? I know we're going to have one-time carryover money for the budget, but I'm also worried about downstream 5 years. You got 5 years out, kind of where we are in our reserves, and kind of from a policy standpoint and from where we actually are.
Well, I will probably point to Nitish to answer that. I think we've got about $7 million in reserves, but I'll let you give the good answer.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. As you know, previous budget adoption, the council approved monies from general fund to go to reserves. So last biennial year, we actually put in $600,000. So this will add additional money. So we're going to be about $7.6 million, which is about 17% of general fund revenues.
Okay, because I think that's, just kind of keep it updated along with this, it will be important. Again, just, when we're projecting out in this year to end with, I think I saw that, $31,000 surplus, that's pretty skinny.
We also have equipment reserve of $6 million too, so.
Okay.
So we do monitor those and do frequent calculations to ensure that we are within the guidelines as recommended.
All right. Thank you, Nitish.
If I may also address that, one of the things on my work plan that I've done in other areas is kind of do a risk-based analysis of what your general fund reserve level should be, looking at some of these things that we talked about as big hits to make sure that we're identifying an appropriate level based on the risk to our city. So that's something that we'll be looking at, and I'll be developing and bringing forward some proposed fiscal policies as well to help guide us as we go forward, kind of navigating some of these big hurdles.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions for now.
Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just maybe to augment Councilmember Ledesma's comments, I think all of us here were on council during the recession. In fact, I think I started right when the recession was hitting. And
cause it?
Yeah, it's been that long. Yeah. So I think the climb out of the recession has been really long, and I think it's always cyclical. So I'm really on these kind of budget things. I've become just very conservative and appreciate that tone and the projections over the years. It's nice to have money, and when we have it, then we can do something with it. But I think the suggestions that you have here on how to allocate the one-time money and the general fund money, I think they're appropriate here. I think we do need to continue to look at our reserves because we are going to hit a recession, and the last thing we want to do is start laying off people and have a little bit of backstop to be able to go through that. So that's really the comments. I know we're going to have to deal with PERS. There's a lot of unknowns. Even if we don't get hit with a recession, there's a lot of other variables that can hit us sideways and really put us in a bind. But I think this is probably a good plan for this time.
Yeah, and thanks to the Mayor Pro Tem for pointing out your first presentation. I just want to, having been on the council when there were no women among the department directors of West Sacramento. Carol Richardson, of course, was the assistant city manager from probably even before we were a city, but there were no women at all. And now I think half of the department directors, including the assistant city manager, are women. Thank you for arriving, and they're all here tonight, and it's very heartwarming to see an organization evolve, and attract some of the best talent in the region and in the state to run our departments from all backgrounds, but thank you and welcome. So on the budget, I want to, I agree with every single word that both of my colleagues have said about this. And the PERS piece is a challenge. I'm under no illusion about what we're trying to do on PERS. We don't have a solution. I mean, the rate of increases that PERS is anticipating, when your predecessor testified before the PERS committee a couple of months ago, and a couple of the other cities said, look, our rate is now, what you're proposing our rate to be 80% of salary or 90% of salary. Which essentially means you can have you can afford to pay for half as many police officers as you could 15 years ago for the same exact amount of money. So it's essentially a 50% budget cut in what's available for police officers. And it's true across the board, but as you say, in particular units, it's much more severe. And so we are in a position where our compensation that we are paying has gone up, 5, 6, 8, 10, 20, 30, 40% in a relatively short period of time, none of which is received by the employees, because they're all going to pay for PERS payments. So taxpayers in the community, through all of these sources, are paying more and more and more for each employee, but those employees are receiving, in many cases, not a penny of that. And it is completely unsustainable. And at 80 or 90% of payroll, it's going to be impossible. So it isn't that we're not going to be able to solve it. The only way to solve it is to shut down city government and just save all the money for later. And we cannot do that. So our best hope is to be as prudent as we can in order to hold on longer than most other cities, and pray that as this gets, a couple years in, pray that other cities go bankrupt before we do. Other cities cut their police and fire departments by 20% before we do, so that maybe then the state will wake up and do something about it. But we don't have the answer. I mean, even the small strategies that we're doing, they do not solve the PERS problem. They just put us in a somewhat healthier position than most other cities, or than some other cities. And that's all we can hope to do, but we are just holding on in that regard. And so each of the strategies that you've laid out tonight and that we've been implementing over the last several years are critical to accomplishing that. But it's an enormous, enormous problem it's no one's fault. Mainly, but it is the fact now, and watching these increases happen when we see revenue up by $500,000, $750,000, and well, okay, then we can start paying more in compensation, or we can add more folks on the beat or whatever. No, because your actual revenues are down. Your net revenues are down because your PERS costs are higher, and that's extraordinarily challenging to hold the community together and to hold an organization together of hardworking, talented, dedicated people in every single one of our departments, for whom we're not able to meet the compensation levels that, not just that they deserve, but also that we want to pay, because we want to continue to attract and retain the very best talent on behalf of our community. So it's incredibly frustrating for members of the council, but I know also for members of our team, of the whole city organization, our team, in order to try to deal with that. So each of these small things and big things are really important. So thank you, and thank you, Mr. Ledesma in particular. I know you spent a lot of hours trying to work through this and make sure that we haven't left a penny anywhere in terms of potential revenues or savings. I had two questions that are only one of which is related to that, and it's the compensation study that's proposed for $50,000. I just want to be careful, because in the Director of Public Works, not ours, but generically, Directors of Public Works love to come and propose every other year studies of how bad the road conditions are. And so that they can then tell you the alternating years, look, I have a study that shows our roads need $1 trillion worth of investment. And you're like, well, our road fund has $200,000 in it. That extra study telling us how much worse it was than we thought it was yesterday didn't really help us. We probably should have spent the money on the study on maybe one more foot of sidewalk. So if we're doing a compensation study, either it really needs to be tuned very specifically to where, fine-grained, where in the organization are unseen things that we need to tackle in order to deal with recruitment and retention, or if it's going to be a study that the results of which we can predict today, because we already know, we already have feedback from the chief of police and the fire chief, and we got the director of public works letter 48 hours ago. Every department is in this situation. If all the study's going to tell us is, hey, we have a $10 million shortfall in compensation without a strategy for what to do about it, really, that's a different strategy than what we already know the gap is, then please don't waste our time and make our team feel even worse for being farther behind. We need to have an answer, not just more detailed information about what the problem is. And so whether that means coming back in, when you come back with the budget, come back with other alternatives and come back with ballot measures if that's appropriate. Given the caveats that Mr. Ledesma said, which are absolutely true, that's the reason why we're in some challenges with Sacramento, is that they face some of these problems and they passed an even larger sales tax than we did specifically to cover compensation. So they're having a reverse problem of us right now. Well, what if we don't have our sales tax? Then we have to cut all these employees or cut their compensation. So it has their own challenges, but you ought to bring back a range of options that will allow us to actually do something with this compensation study and not just make us feel even worse about the problem that we can't solve. So that's my only advice on that particular element. And then the other piece is just a Measure E issue, and that's on the home run piece. I don't quite understand the carryover and on the home run and all of that, but I do understand one thing. When the budget for the home run in total, for Measure E in total, but the budget specifically Measure E was built. The Measure E budget's built very much on the notion that it's creating an infrastructure for a whole ecosystem of connected initiatives and programs in conjunction with the school district and the community colleges and and private sector partners and employers, but it has to get built. Right, that's the reason for the marketing piece, for example. A significant thing has to get built, and then once it's built, then it largely operates among the partners, and at that point, more and more young people in the community have made it through and are ready to take advantage of tuition-free college or of the scholarships or the paid internships. But in the front years, there's fewer young people eligible for those benefits, and more of the money is to be spent on infrastructure, on building the program, right? So that was the idea around that it would be essentially a constant appropriation over time, but the composition of that appropriation would be a lot of base building and data systems building and marketing and that sort of thing at the beginning. Over time, that share would, relatively rapidly, but over time that share would shrink and the amount of money essentially in direct benefits would increase, right? So, looking at a projection of $700,000, which seems like that's low, and I'm just watching, as we're tomorrow morning, the Los Feliz Community Colleges are having a major session on their college promise, for example. It's clearly understaffed for the base building period, with one half of a person doing this entire program, and it should not be heavily staffed as a permanent thing. As an ongoing expenditure. That's part of our commitment to Measure E, but also it's the way the home run is supposed to be designed. So I would just, as you're looking at building the actual budget proposal for us when it comes forward for our consideration for the mid-years, that you take a look at potential one-time use of one-time dollars in the Measure E account for the purpose of providing sufficient of support in order to do that, the build work that is envisioned in that program. So it seems short today, given what has to be created and what's being launched essentially every other day in terms of those initiatives. So those are my only two comments about the mid-years, but I share my colleagues' praise for this is clear. It's clear the choices that are proposed here are appropriately small in most cases. They're one time wherever they can be, and they really are things that are essential and preserve our ongoing dollars to the maximum extent possible to deal with some of these large challenges of both compensation and the PERS question. So, anything further? All right, so do you have sufficient direction?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, that brings us then to item 24, which is consideration of the 2018 Measure E annual report. Ms. Berlin. Oh, you're coming out.
I think I'll go sit by Roberta. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. I'm here tonight to present the Measure E 2018 annual report. Measure E was approved by the voters in 2016 and added a quarter-cent sales tax. It also identified several areas of focused investment. Since that time, council has approved a universal policy document which outlines the policy considerations for guiding the council and staff in the implementation of Measure E funding and to assure accountability to the voters. The universal policy document calls for staff to return annually to the council with a report describing Measure E accomplishments for the preceding fiscal year. Since Measure E commenced in April 1, 2017, the revenue for Measure E, council has approved several appropriations in fiscal years 17-18 and 18-19, consistent with this universal policy guidance. But council has purposely avoided pre-programming all Measure E funds to retain flexibility for opportunistic use of the funds. Those appropriations are outlined in more detail in the report. This presentation provides a short overview of some of those appropriations by Measure E purpose area. So the first purpose area is repairing roads, and the first project is the State Streets Rehabilitation Project. This is a project to fund neighborhood local road rehab projects that would not qualify for grant funding. This project includes the state streets, which is encompassed by 15th Street, Jefferson, Stone, and Park. Currently, the site is being surveyed, and the project is scheduled to be ready for bid advertisement in 2019 and pending funding for construction. The next project is the West Capitol Avenue West End Rehabilitation Project. This covers Park Boulevard to West Capitol Avenue on Jefferson, and from Jefferson Boulevard to Enterprise Boulevard on West Capitol Avenue. The use of Measure E funds here is to contribute to a larger pot of funds to extend the design of the improvements from Harbor Boulevard to Enterprise and to add additional safety features to the project. The road rehabilitation construction funding will cover as far west as Harbor, and staff is planning to seek additional construction funding for the road rehabilitation to Enterprise later this year. Next project is the citywide pavement rehabilitation program, which the mayor so lovingly referred to earlier, which is to update the pavement management system to inventory the condition of the entire city road network. And that will provide Public Works with the ability to prioritize a list of projects to be developed for commission feedback and council approval in September. Our next purpose area is building and maintaining bicycle and pedestrian trails. And the first project is the Sycamore Trail Slurry Seal Project. It's in the green there. It's a little bit hard to see, but basically this provides additional funding to put a pavement preservation treatment on top of the Sycamore Trail. The plan is to bring a contract to council for approval in July and construction completed by the end of 2018. This would add 5 to 7 years to the life of the pavement surface. The next project is the West Capitol Avenue Safety and Security Project. So this is a companion to the project under repairing roads, and this would add the additional bicycle and pedestrian safety elements, including pedestrian crossings and enhanced bike lane treatments. Next is the Clarksburg Branch Lane Trail, it's a typo, Branch Lane Trail Safety and Security Grant. We're expected notification of this grant in November of 18, so we don't have the funding secured for that yet. But the project adds safety elements to the existing Clarksburg Branch Lane Trail, extends the trail to South River Road, and completes the sidewalk on Linden between Stonegate and River City High School by the OLG school. Next project is the development fees for the Nest project. The city approved covering the city development fees to facilitate the Nest bike rest stop and hydration station on the Clarksburg Branch Line Trail. and the project is planned to be submitted, is projected to be submitted to city for review early this summer. And then finally, the completion of the Bike Ped and Trails Master Plan, which is a citywide project. That plan is coming forward to council for a workshop in May and adoption in June. Next purpose area is homelessness and reducing the community impacts of homelessness. Council provided funding to increase the public and open space cleanup in the city. Since March 2017, there have been 408 public and open space cleanups. The funding also went towards the rapid response team, which is the next item, and there's been 36 actions just for rapid response since January of 2018. There's been a total of 378 actions, including rapid response, since Measure E funds were provided from September 1st to May 10th, 2018. So there's been a marked increase in the number of open space cleanups that we've been able to accomplish with the additional funding through Measure E. Critical to both the public and open space cleanup and the rapid response team is the homeless coordinator, which Roberta mentioned in her presentation. He works alongside the teams in doing these cleanups to provide outreach to those encountered. He had a total of 141 encounters with homeless persons in 16 and 17, and that increased to 232 in 17-18. And as far as people housed, he was able to house 94 people in 16-17 and increased to 103 people in 17-18. So the additional funding and being a part of this team has really been valuable to the community. Our next purpose area is the West Sacramento Home Run. The first base is the Universal Preschool Program. This year, we've identified and secured 672 high-quality preschool slots, covering approximately 79 to 90% of all eligible four-year-olds citywide. The plan for this next year is to increase that number, and with the goal of getting enough spots for 100% of the eligible four-year-olds. We're also working on securing a financial services provider to host the College Savings Account program by the end of June. For second base, paid internships and digital badges. We've worked with Future Ready to provide 30 digital badges in 2017, which was an increase from the 17 badges created in the prior year. We've also provided 24 paid Career Ready internships with 4 local employers for Washington Unified students in integrated college and careers pathways. And staff is continuing to work with Future Ready to provide increased number of paid Career Ready internships. Third base is the College Promise, and which provides fee-free college at 3 of the Sac City College campuses and up to a $1,000 scholarship. Staff's been working with Los Rios Community College and provided 66 students with College Promise fee-free college during fall of 2017 and spring of 2018. And staff is working with the Community Colleges District to maximize that number of applicants for fall of 2018. The scholarship piece is still to come as we get more students participating in the program. And then the last purpose area is Smart City. And there's nothing on the map as of yet because we're still building that out. The first appropriation for this purpose area was the Startups and Residents. That's a program that connects local startups with, startups with local governments to develop technology products to solve civic challenges. We had one firm in 2017 that was working on an online fee estimator. They had a few issues with that, and so we're still exploring options with them. We've made great progress with our 2018 firm working on a volunteer matching program, and we're currently negotiating a draft license document for that application. The next item is the Zen City sentiment analysis, which the mayor mentioned earlier. that recently won the $1 million prize for from Microsoft. Staff has been using this platform and finding it to be a useful tool for identifying emergency community issues and for measuring the impact of both city communications efforts and other projects in the community. There was approved a contract with the Smart Cities Council, which is the next one, and a readiness workshop was held on February 13th with a bunch of local stakeholders. Smart Cities Council has provided staff with a summary report, and that's being used as a basis for a council workshop on the Smart City Strategy, which will come to council in May or June, and that will be the document that informs the ecosystem for developing our smart city projects. The next item is the Transportation for America. We got Measure E funds to join that organization, which promotes investment in smart transportation projects. Our representative is Sarah Strand, and she attended the first T4A event in May of 2018. And finally, the AARP Challenge Grant. We haven't received that yet. We're expected to get notified of whether or not we've received that grant in June of this year, and it will give us $10,000 and with a $10,000 match in Measure E funds, and we plan to use the funds to provide education support to older West Sacramento residents to give them access on our new VIA on-demand transportation pilot, as well as bike and/or scooter share. So those are all of the main projects that have been approved in Measure E so far. This is sort of a status of where we are with the fund. The available Measure E fund balance at the beginning of each fiscal year. The fiscal year 17-18 includes some carryover funds from 16-17 from that April to June timeframe when the Measure E revenue started running. We just carried those over as one-time money into the available fund balance. The total Measure E commitment for each year is shown, and the surplus. There was discussion earlier on the budget item about this West Sacramento Home Run Budget Reserve. The idea was, as the mayor was saying, it's not taking that money away from Home Run, it's basically setting it aside so that they would have, the Home Run program would really retain its funding target amount for each year in order to fund those build costs. So because they didn't, the Home Run program didn't get appropriations up to its funding target of 1.05 million this year, that additional 341,000 would sort of remain in reserve for the next years and so on to provide that additional revenue to offset those costs of the build years. And as far as Measure E fund leverage, that's also was a main concern of the council. Page 4 of the staff report provides a summary of those grants and other funding that have been used as a match for Measure E appropriations. Two of the grants are not yet approved. So, but in the event that we get all of the funds that we've applied for, our ratio of outside funds to Measure E funds is almost 1.5 to 1. So we have a pretty good leverage if this all comes to fruition. This concludes my report. I'd like to thank Public Works and Parks and Recreation and the Police Department and our Deputy City Manager and our West Sacramento Home Run Program Manager for their contribution to this report. It was a bear, and they did a great job, and I really appreciate all their hard work on it. They're also here if you have any questions on the specific projects.
All right, thank you, Ms. Berlin. Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Amanda, would it be useful to project out like 5 years on something like this? Because a lot of these initiatives and programs that we've started, obviously some are kind of in the very beginning stages. You know, for example, the Smart City Initiative, we really don't have any costs associated with that. The plan is going to be, I think, presented next month or the month after that, and we'll start looking at actual budget items that are going to have. But these things are going to take, years to do. Does it make sense to maybe look at a Measure E projection 5 or 6 years out with maybe kind of showing how these projects are going to map out over that period of time? Would that be helpful? I mean, for me, it would be, because you're kind of looking at, a lot of these things we're trying to augment with grants and, with other money to match other funds. But there's also a financial exposure that we have when we start embarking on these kind of programs. It may be helpful to see, kind of like, an encumbrance analysis of over the next 5 or 6 years, based on, of course, there's variables of what Measure E is going to bring in, but I think it'd kind of help a little bit, kind of get a bigger picture of what's going on with these programs.
Yeah, we can take a look at that. With the Smart Cities Plan, once we have more of an idea of what types of projects
Yeah, I know,
will be
there's
coming
not-
forward, we can certainly take a look at that.
Yeah. Some of these are just ongoing, like the homeless situation. It's probably something that's going to continue that way, basically the same numbers for a while. We've got a supportive housing project that's coming up. There could be some issues there. But, some of these seem to be pretty stable for that time, but others, we have no idea what they're going to be at this point.
Just a structural question. So the Measure E allocation buckets have 2 for homelessness. One is
Right.
reducing homelessness, and the other is reducing community impacts of homelessness. And in here, either only one of them is reflected, or have they been merged?
Only one is reflected, because
Okay.
there was no appropriations in the other, and they're reducing homelessness. So we just didn't include it.
Okay. In the future, I'd recommend that you do, just for full transparency, both for us and for folks in the community that might be looking at it. And which will beg the question, why haven't you spent money in that and reducing homelessness? But we are working on a set of projects that will require more than 1 year's worth of money in order to accomplish. But we can easily describe that in the text, but I think it's important to not make it appear as though we've forgotten about it, or that there's money that we haven't disclosed, so.
No, makes total sense.
Questions at this time?
I did. I just
Yeah,
want to
Pro
give,
Tem Ledesma.
thank you. And I just want to comment more on form than substance at the moment. So that is the report and the thoroughness of the review of all the initiatives for each one of the targeted areas that we were addressing. Just thanks to the staff. It is, you said it was a bear, it is a bear, and it reflects that. And that's kind of what we, at least I did, anticipated when we drafted the policy for this, is that we wanted these dollars to be, staff to be thoughtful and think about actual outcomes and tie them to the outcomes as more than any other funding mechanism we had, other than kind of the community capital improvement plan we're going to get to in a second. That's sort of tangible things, but here, these are other kind of initiatives. We want to make sure staff really thought through how we appropriate this and tie them to, like I said, outcomes. So thank you for the work on this and articulating each one of your thoughts on the program. It was a lot of work, but in the essence of what we just talked about on transparency, that was one of our goals. What were we thinking? What were we doing? What was the value proposition you're recommending? And then did we realize it? And a lot of this answers that we're really early on, and we understand that. But the fact that, the other area that I wanted to comment on is making sure we're as you did, is the articulation of the leverage. That was a really important piece for us, is how much this is leveraging. I mean, you see we're spending on the urban greening grant, and $200,000 is not a number to sneeze at. But we get back if we get back any part of $2.9 million to do all those things, and the neighbors in the neighborhood will feel that immediately because of the impact it will have on London and River City High School and kids' ability to get to school, or people's ability just to walk to the Southport Town Center, which charges too high rents apparently, and but those are hugely impactful, and I think the community needs to see that we use that to, finding $2.9 million to do all that, we could never do, but this allowed us to do it. So thank you for showing that. I think to a large degree, I was going to bring up, you'd really bring at the end, it's not reflected in here, that we voted on one thing tonight, which is the
homeless coordinator, well, yeah.
Well, we have two things then tonight, the homeless coordinator and then
Oh, yes,
the
the
pavement and
roads.
striping. So we haven't included those.
Right, I mentioned that in the upcoming Measure E appropriation proposals. So
Okay.
at the time of the report, it wasn't approved, so I didn't want to be presumptuous.
Thank you. But I just want to make sure that we get to put those into that bucket as well as areas that, so not only in the road repair do we have the road fund, which we all saw has, nothing in it, our road fund, but we are spending these dollars to do exactly what the gas tax can't provide anymore. So, and with SB1 numbers, and I think even those, you articulate in the leverage, that we're able to leverage this with SB1. We're going to have to show that again with the pavement striping, so that again, that equals what SB1 funds on, the other project is $300,000, and then we add the $250,000 that would come in, so.
And that was almost one-to-one with the Measure E money.
Yeah, so terrific. And anyway, so just really appreciate the work that went into getting these all your programs and your suggested funding to us, and then this is a great report just to kind of have available for the public, and no one's going to look at it within the body of a 26-item agenda item tonight, so we don't want to think about how we can provide it so people can review it on their own, and see how again, they can see how it was spent, and they can see how we utilized it, how we leveraged it, and the programs that they will be filling soon. If you're in the state streets, you're going to be getting those very bad roads fixed very soon. We were not able to do that without this. And then for kids that are benefiting from universal preschool or benefiting from the Kids Home Run early on, they're going to fill it as well. So thank you for your work on this.
Yeah, I completely agree. I know this has been it's been a passion to implement, but also a big challenge. I know a public works director trying to slip me some arsenic in a drink in Puerto Rico when we were there. He's just so mad about how impossible the council's expectations were in the implementation of Measure E, because they are. I mean, given what we just talked about on the budget, it's a lot of resources, but that's only relative. It's actually hardly any resources when we're talking about the scope of what the community is trying to achieve with these investments. Fix roads in every part of the community, and make sure every child's ready to succeed in kindergarten, and then get a job in high school and go to college and get a great career. Make us one of the smartest cities in the world in technology. Reduce the impacts of homelessness and help people get out of homelessness. These are not small things that we are attempting to do, and with a relatively constrained amount of money to do that. But then the nuances of how to implement these individual programs, where on roads, it's like, just go and fix roads, just go do them, just go make those projects happen. So we want a really heavy project focus. And on parks and trails, we want more parks and trails, but we need to leverage a lot more money, because this is not enough money to build one trail. So you got to go out and leverage, but bring us projects. On the smart city stuff, it was, we want a strategy on being smart, but we also don't want to spend a lot of money strategizing either. We want to get out there and be agile and flexible and experiment and innovate and try. So this set of appropriations based on the spending guidelines that we put together really reflects that. Very, very, very powerful. I mean, it captures what was a mix of strategies and approaches and frameworks and paradigms around how to do this, and a mix of venture funds and infrastructure funds and all the things that we talked about that were complicated. I think it's very clear from this report that this first full year of implementation that the whole organization is pulling in the same direction to really do this in a way that delivers and is also innovative at the same time, and tackling some of the hardest problems in society in a really powerful way, and attracting a lot of not just attention for it, but other folks who are prepared to make investments in our success and in our solutions to those challenges and problems. So appreciate your work, Ms. Berlin, and the team, folks who worked on the report, but really everyone in the organization that's been helping to move this forward in the smartest way possible. So we did have one request to speak on. That's by Pat Flint.
Okay, this budget is near and dear to me. This is taxpayer money. You need to cut the fluff and get down to the bones. Measure E is a perfect place to fund fire and police. Public funding never expires. That's the way the measure was written. Right from the general fund, it goes right out. It goes for consultant fees, for special programs, special projects. If you want to really save some money, you start looking at those kinds of expenses. And Measure E money can be used for any lawful purpose. Fire and police are very lawful purposes. There are special programs that can be eliminated as they are only benefiting a very small portion of our community. We are not Portland, Oregon by a long shot. Without infrastructure to allow for these special programs, you can't afford them. The city should not be in the educational business, period. The educational business belongs to the educational people in West Sacramento and the state of California. Mr. Mayor, I know that you have a passion for education. I can see it, I can hear it, and I applaud it. And I know that it's part of your business and job outside of being mayor here in California, in West Sacramento. Schools should be funding the types of programs that you are actually building and creating. It should be constructed, it should not be construed as a conflict of interest for you personally, but there have been a few times that it's crossed the line. And I have not said anything because I know it's a passion for you. Public safety should be your utmost, most important thing for our community. I know CalPERS is a problem. I know it's going to be a problem in the future. But there are ways you can fund those. And the last time the budget was cut, police and fire took a huge cut, and they were willing to do it. Now you be willing to give them the pay raises they deserve. Plan for future demands. Home Run and Pathways are great programs for kids, but they should benefit all children, not just a few. So again, I applaud your educational know-how and your passion for it, but you need to take care of our citizens first. Thank you.
All right, so there's the only request we have for public comment, so we'll return it back to the council. Any further questions or discussion?
Does this require a motion?
This is, no, this is just receiving the annual report.
I have no other questions.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. All right, then we're going to proceed to item 25, which is presentation and discussion of proposed midterm adjustments to the city's adopted biennial capital improvement program budget ending June 30th, 2019. Now, Mr. Sharma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Nitish Sharma with the City Finance Division. Today, we are respectfully seeking the City Council direction on the proposed midterm capital improvement program budget for fiscal year 18-19. I have a small, a brief PowerPoint that I just want to go over some of the numbers on there. So, anyhow, staff is proposing a minor budget update due to significant number of active projects with approved budget or commitments. In your packet, we have included a comprehensive list of active and planned projects illustrated by category and by fund. Yeah, just do it from there. Anyhow, so the current CIP program has 196 active projects. Of this, the total approved budget is 136 million. Expenditures to date is 34 million, and we have a remaining council-approved commitment of 102 million. I just listed some of the major projects that are part of the 102. For example, the streetcar design and construction, Grand Gateway infrastructure project currently underway, sewer system cleaning inspection, but the total sewer project is about $9 million, and then water system improvements of 17.3 million. And also in 2018-19, as I said, that we have a very minor update where 25 projects with proposed budget adjustments, $14.3 million in budget request, and some of the major projects are Rayleigh's Dock, Sycamore Trail Phase 2 and 3, and City Corporation Yard. The staff report has listed by fund all the project requests. Next slide. This slide I just put together just to demonstrate of the 14.3 million, how are the funding sources. Measure G is about 28%, as you can see, and the recent rate study for utilities allowed us to do more water and sewer improvement projects. But I also want to point out that a majority of these projects have some kind of grant associated with it, grant revenue, basically revenues from other sources. And if you look at our current active project list, pretty much every project has some kind of grant or other contributions. So the city has been very fortunate, or has been very good at seeking outside funding source and using very limited local funds for our capital improvement program. Next slide. So just did few of the projects on this slide. This is Measure G funded projects, and just highlighted some of the important, some of the key projects that we're working on or we're asking for funding. For the first one is the Rayleigh's Dock project. The 1.1 million will actually provide matching funds of 1.5 million in federal grants. Also, the Sycamore Trail, the $900,000 will provide a matching money for the 1.1 million from SACOG. So total request of Measure G is 4.2 million. There's other projects listed in here, and there's the detail in the staff report as well. Measure K, we are proposing 3 new projects in Measure K, basically from the unrestricted fund balance. As you know, in Measure K, we are setting money aside for streetcar operations, and each year we are allocating $225,000 pursuant to the Measure J. And we are actually going to be coming back to council in June with the Measure K and Measure V update report that you'll be able to see the total, the scorecard and how the money has been allocated and spent. So 3 projects, a couple of shade structure, Westfield Park and Summerfield Park, and then a seed money basically for residential traffic calming construction. Basically, this will allow Public Works to start addressing that area. Traffic.
And just before you go on from that one, so $100,000 is not very much for residential traffic calming. I mean, for most folks, it's like, oh, how much could a stop sign cost? Well, a lot more than you think. So what are we really hoping to accomplish with that? I mean, once you start putting money back in that fund again, then you create an expectation in the community that there's actually funds to be spent in that way. So my only concern is that you're going to be creating a whole bunch of demand that's impossible to meet.
I think you're right.
By putting by starting to fund that program, unless there's some specific project that we've already identified that's a critical priority that we want to fund.
I'll let Public Works Director answer that question.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. So throughout the year, we get requests from the members of the public or our own staff on traffic calming needs throughout the city. So what we do is we collect those requests and we analyze them and see if it is a real need or it's just a perceived need. And then we make a list of that. We take it to the TMI Commission every 6 months, and we prioritize them based on certain criteria. And so these $100,000, so we have a list of those projects. The smaller ones we can accommodate with the existing budget. We can just go and do it without the existing budget. But these $100,000 will address the top 3 needs of the list. So we will address 3 projects, specific project with the $100,000.
Okay. And why now, or why not in the regular budget cycle, or is there urgency about? Is it that there's funding available, or why did we decide that this year we want to spend more money in this program than?
Well, our hope is every year we would come to the council and ask for maybe the top 3 or top 5, or whatever we can afford at the time. So this time we thought there's $100,000 that measure can absorb, so we thought we'll do the top 3 projects from that list.
It's three projects within that $100,000?
3 locations, yes. I don't have the exact locations, but there are 3 locations.
Someone's going to tell me where they...
So on Oakland Bay Drive, there's a crosswalk request from the residents, so we are doing that. And Lake Washington and Highland Drive intersection improvements. And then the Bear River and Village Parkway, we are providing flashing beacons and additional signing. So those are the 3 things that we can do with $100,000.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I've always had mixed feelings about these because there's an unlimited, pool of these projects that folks would like us to do. And we're not really great at assessing after the fact, like, did this actually have an effect? Right, we try to be responsive because folks want to have a stop sign or a crosswalk or a flashing light. But, did it really are we really making a difference, or are we just spending money because we've been asked to, and we have so many other deep needs, both on the capital and the operating side. And so that's just, it's not about those 3 projects in particular. I don't know the details of what the studies show on them, but just knowing, we've been down this road before, and it's the reason why in the recession we basically eliminated the residential traffic calming program, because we determined in terms of the full range of priorities, it wasn't the top of the list. And so that's why I'm curious about adding additional supplemental appropriations on top of what we already have. But you can answer.
So we are not doing this project just because somebody asked for it. We do an analysis to see if that is really needed out there, and only then we put that on the list, and then we prioritize them based on some criteria.
Thank you. Couple of requests in traffic fund. I just want to point out that the staff is working on traffic model studies, so later on, sometime staff will be in front of council with a list of traffic improvement projects, and CIP budget and plan will be amended with that information. Just parking fund, we actually $100,000 to do a remodel at a parking lot across the street on West Capitol Avenue. The cost of this is basically from Measure G and shown as a transfer in. Next, please. And just last one on this slide is the new corporation yard. Staff is going to be in front of council, I believe, next council meeting to provide more information about the project detail and sources and uses. So as you know, the new corporation yard, $5 million, $3 million is from water fund and $2 million is from sewer fund, and the rest of the money is from the sale of the existing, the old corporation yard in Southport Business Park. So, next.
Just on the measure, on the West Capitol parking lot?
Yes.
So for Measure G has a purpose in terms of community investment for the purpose of leveraging, economic activity and what have you. We are investing quite a bit of energy and resources in making it possible, making it less required that a car be used for every trip. So what was the analysis behind why we need to be, in these times, why we need to be prioritizing money for a parking lot on West Capitol?
Should I turn it over to Public Works Director? Actually, I don't know.
Yeah, so this is the lot right across the street that Los Rios uses. The city uses it for overflow parking as well. I think that the general thought on this one is improving the utility of that lot could, make it more useful for other purposes. For example, when we had the Y shuttle, it was the parking lot for that. I think also this is related to a commitment that was made between the community college and the city over a number of spaces that were swapped out for senior parking at the community center. We're trying to make good on that commitment to improve the lot with some basic resurfacing and striping to take care of some of the issues that are encountered with the student parking. But in terms of the appropriateness of Measure G funding, it really goes back to because the parking fund is still evolving in terms of its revenue sources, This is the kind of the next best approach for funding that lot, and again, to improve the utility of it for uses in the Civic Center area. Until we have streetcar, this is probably going to be planned for a parking garage and development, but in the meantime, it has some serious problems with potholes and surfacing that we're looking to correct, and this is really the best appropriate source for it that we could identify.
And are the other partners in the lot, the county and the college, are they also contributing, or?
They're not contributing directly to the funding, no, but as I mentioned before, that arrangement was made with the community college a number of years ago to swap out spaces so seniors could have more direct access to the community center. So it's sort of an informal contribution in that sense, but no, they're not contributing funding.
Okay. I'm going to put a flag on this one for, not for later down, but just for when this comes back. I mean, this Measure G, we spent a lot of time on Measure E, but Measure G, protecting the integrity of Measure G so that it doesn't become, well, we don't have anywhere else to pay for something, here's a need that we have and there's money available. And that's kind of been, Measure G wasn't the traffic calming source, right? Or is
No.
it? Okay, thank God. Okay, that's Measure K, right? Same problem, actually, but we shouldn't get in a place where we're like, okay, there's a fund balance in these measures, and therefore, look, there's money available, what can we spend it on? There's money available here, and we have needs over here. If they don't match up with what those funding sources are, that we're in voter-approved measures, in the same way that Measure E was specifically for the home run and homelessness and the elements that are in it, and it's our job to protect the integrity of that.
Yeah, and as we've done on Measure G, and to keep the flexibility of it, we could explore a similar approach here, where it is a parking fund transfer. We could, once parking revenue is sufficient, look to transfer that money back to Measure G if that's, the council's direction, but something we can consider.
Thank you. Yes, and so this slide basically lists all the projects that did not make the list. It's in their staff report as well. So as you can see, pretty much we have a plan on the shade structure, so you'll see a lot of shade structure project and a road rehab project. But as I mentioned before, the capital improvement program is huge for us at the moment, so that's why a lot of projects are not on there. And at the same time, we are still doing a lot of studies, like traffic studies, and a lot of projects for water and sewer are already in the plan. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
No questions at this time? Okay, thanks, Nitish.
Thank you.
A couple of requests for public comment. So the first is Pat Flint.
I forgot to mention that the city is also sitting on a fairly healthy investment portfolio. I don't know where the funds are coming from to put into the portfolio. It may be bond money that, I have no idea, but it's pretty healthy. If I remember, and my mind isn't that great this time of night, it's about $253 million. And when did we start funding the streetcar out of Measure K? Measure K was long before the streetcar idea ever came. It should be coming out of Measure V, U or V. So that's a new thing for me. And getting back to reflection of what happened at the beginning of this meeting, Christina Vinson's job in the Air Force is she works the boom that refuels the jets. So I just thought that a Wesat girl made us proud. Thank you.
And Laura Jameson?
Good evening. I just had a quick question in going through the tables, and I want to make sure I read it right. I calculated with Measure V funds about just over 30 million allocated towards the streetcar, 2.8 to a village parkway road improvement, and 4.5 to flood. And I just wanted to verify, is that right? I believe Measure V was sold to the community as flood and streetcar, but it seems to be very heavily allocated towards streetcar. So I just want to make sure that I'm kind of reading this right. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Nitish, can you answer that last question?
Yes, we actually have a plan on the flood improvement, the Southport EIP project. So we contributed $4.5 million, and we have another $5.5 million obligation. And right now, we actually haven't spent any streetcar money. It's just a commitment. So we have cash balance. So as needed in the Southport EIP project, we'll come before council and seek to more money, but towards that program. So at this time, it's just a budget commitment.
So the short story is they're neither of them have an annual commitment.
No.
We've spent a lot of the Measure V money has been, well, all of it's been spent on flood protection
Yes.
essentially so far, because streetcar was pending. But those have been coming in chunks of $4 or $5 million. What's showing on this budget is our total commitment for streetcar, which is the balance, which is $30 million.
Yeah.
Over time, they'll be roughly even,
Yeah.
most likely, but the commitments to meet both of their needs. So, and Measure K included funding for light rail, which was
Yes.
repurposed once the light rail project was converted to the streetcar project. That component of Measure K for light rail was converted to streetcar in addition, prior to the passage of Measure V.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
No. Nope.
Any other comments? I mean, the couple of comments I had about parking and traffic calming aside, I think this is a strong set of projects, and I'm glad you highlighted, I don't know if it's new, but just the amount of money that's being leveraged from all of the, other external grants and supports, I think really demonstrates how, how effective this is. And one of the reasons why, and it's hard, folks in the communities, they see all these, you see this road that's, $20 million, you see this bridge for $100 million, you see the streetcar project for $150 million. You're like, the city can do anything. And this kind of report, I think, emphasizes that in most of these cases, we're the minority funder. What we're trying to do is find places where we can get state and federal grants to invest in us, and that requires us to have matching funds available to do it. But there's not discretionary money that we could spend on other things. They've got to be spent in these categories. But these are very strong projects, and they do advance our community goals, the park goals that we've had, and certainly our mobility and economic development goals. So. All right. Do you have all the direction that you need? Yes. Okay. All right, that brings us into item 26, which is consideration of employment agreement for city manager. I guess this is this my item? So this is the council at its meeting on April 27th, appointed Aaron Laurel as the next city manager of West Sacramento. Let me just confirm, Aaron, you're still interested? It's been a long meeting, but okay. So we appointed Aaron Laurel as the city manager, and in between that meeting and tonight, prepared the employment agreement that's contained in item 26. The summary of the agreement is here, but pursuant to a new state law, I need to also describe it orally. And so the principal provisions of the agreement, which are based on the structure of the agreement with the prior city manager, but the salient differences are a salary of $200,000 per year, and Mr. Laurel's current retirement plan that he's had because he's been a longstanding 13-year employee of the city of West Sacramento and an employee of the city of Woodland before that, with the health and dental and vision insurance premiums paid by the city, and the same deferred compensation plan that all the department directors have in terms of the city's contribution of 4.5% of salary, with the required employee contribution and a severance provision of 3 months during the first 2 years agreement and 6 months thereafter, which is entirely within the authority that the council approved in the meeting when it made the appointment of Mr. Laurel as the city manager. So if there are not questions at this time, I was going to ask, there is one request for public comment by Pat Flint.
Mr. Tuttle, I know you'll be around for a few more weeks, but I just wanted to tell you thank you for serving our community, and you did a very good job, even though sometimes I got a little testy with you. And I want to welcome the new city manager, and you'll probably be hearing from me too. So thank you again.
Thanks, Pat. So if I may, I think my reaction to this is Very well. First, thank you, Marty. So you are going to be around for a few more weeks, and we're counting on you. And again, thank you. But for tonight, it's welcoming the new, and I couldn't be more proud to see one of our members, the fine members of our fine team here, come up the ranks and take this position. So it's my great pleasure to make this motion, accept this appointment and the contract provision.
I will second that. Oh, well, let me, yeah, I'd like to also, Marty will have time to, I think.
Roast.
Yeah, the roast will be coming up. But, yeah, it's obviously been, I think, a pleasure working with you. And Aaron, I think it'll be great working with you. I think, without getting too much into the process of the selection, I think Aaron was just a really strong choice on doing this, and we really have a lot of great hopes that he'll succeed at this. He certainly has got the drive, and it looks like he has the support of the city as well. So really looking forward to this transition, and Marty will be talking later.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this appointment, and how easy and obvious this was in so many ways. The council, I think, we did not. The council decided at the very beginning of the process, as soon as we were informed that our city manager would be leaving us, that we were going to not spend the money to pay for a traditional city manager recruitment firm. Because we didn't have that much money, but mainly because we knew we would get some really outstanding city managers from smaller cities and assistant city managers from bigger cities, folks who are very well skilled and talented as in the city management profession. But we knew that we already had quite a few leaders within the organization that were already at the top of their fields. In that field, and that if they happened to be working in another city, we would have been clawing down that city's doors to get them. So we opened the position and made a search possible on the possibility that Barack Obama might apply, or Elon Musk, or someone different than a traditional city manager candidate. But we knew that we didn't need to spend a lot of money on a consultant, because we had such outstanding candidates, and more than just one. We had outstanding candidates of various stripes in the executive leadership of City Hall already. Not by chance, but by development and by the support of the manager and support of the council, and very much because of the support of their colleagues and their team members. And so across many departments, and it was a source of great pride. But then we did the search. We completed with a set of interviews with the most diverse pool of candidates this city's ever considered, and I venture to say any city in the region has ever considered for city manager, internal and external candidates with a variety of backgrounds and really diverse, and multiple internal candidates who were fantastic, and it was. Having to make a choice was difficult, but being in the room here doing the interviews with the rest of the council, to see the talent and the passion and the dedication of leaders within our organization step forward on display, and their love for the city and their ideas and their readiness to lead was incredibly inspiring. And so thanks to internal candidates, and congratulations to Aaron. Aaron is going to be, Aaron has been an incredible, really incredible, creative, intelligent leader since the moment he got here. Just working on CDBG, and then on something else, and then on revenue and grants, and then probably working in the fire department doing something. Aaron's been the fixer, the creative guy, the team builder across a wide variety of disciplines in City Hall, but also out in statewide in economic development, working the legislature and the Congress as part of our governmental affairs team, and leading that team at one point. And it's just been everything. Every time we faced a certain death as a city because of the end of redevelopment or whatever, Aaron was a big part of that team. And so I couldn't be happier. I think Aaron's one of the brightest, best public administrators we've ever worked with, and he's had the opportunity because of his colleagues and because of the people that work with him, and particularly because of two city managers who have, in very different ways, supported and elevated and challenged him and given him the room to run, and the guidance to grow, to continue to grow as a leader and an executive. So this is fantastic, and it's a solid contract too. So, I think we have an expectation Aaron's going to be with us for quite a long time. He's been a resident of the city and a homeowner in 2 different places in State Streets in Westmore Oaks, I guess is the way to the right way to define the neighborhoods. His heart's in the community too. So, Mr. Tuttle.
And if I could, Mr. Mayor and our few council members here tonight, thank you for the nice comments, and thank you, Ms. Flint, too, for those comments. But I think I want to speak for the executive staff that's here tonight, hanging into the end of the meeting. They're also very pleased with this appointment. I don't think we're going to miss a beat with this, and I say this in sincerity. I think this organization continues to go up, and with Aaron, I actually think we take it up a notch because he brings a lot of energy and a lot of idealism into the position. But more importantly than that, he brings the support of all the executive staff. So I know that, our chiefs in public safety, our clerk, our new hire over there at admin services, and then with both Amanda and Jeff, they have he has their full support. And I think this organization's got nothing but to go up, and really want to applaud the council for doing this so quickly. When I announced that I would leave on July 1, I did not anticipate that you would move so quickly on this. I have talked to Aaron. He's going to take some vacation in June, but I could leave anytime. If he wants to move into that office and take the phone calls, he's more than welcome to do that. But the plan is that I would just go ahead right up to the end of June, and then Aaron takes a little break and then comes back, and I anticipate just a real smooth transition. But I appreciate the process, and I really appreciate the opportunity to work with this great group of talented executive staff that you have, and then just throughout the entire city. And a great group of community members, too, that have been nothing but supportive, so really appreciate it.
Thank you. Of course we got it done. You've taught us well, delivering on early and under budget. So.
Yes, you did move quickly.
In this case, got a good one. So, all right. There's been a motion and a second to approve the employment agreement. Yes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Welcome aboard.
Does he want to say?
Oh, did you want to say something, Mr. Laurel?
Actually, I think everyone sort of said a lot of what I was going to say, but
You're going to say that all those compliments about yourself?
No, not about me, about all you. But needless to say, I am so excited and I'm proud because I'm a longtime employee here and I'm a longtime resident to be taking this opportunity. I am forever grateful to the council for having the faith in me and the trust in me for this opportunity. Very grateful to Marty for the 6 years of mentorship and giving me every opportunity and throwing every challenge at me in the book to get me prepared for this. And also to the executive team and the other staff that are here and throughout the organization, many of whom I've worked with for 13 years. I have total confidence in coming into this position because of them. Also because of the community, the great leaders we have in the community that I've drawn so much on in my time here. So very, very grateful for the opportunity. Can't wait to get started. Also have to thank my wife and my 2 boys for supporting my career. And they love West Sacramento as much as I do. So thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Aaron. All right, then with that, we'll proceed to council calendar. Ms. Berlin?
All right, I guess I got to follow that. So some events that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. On Friday, we have the Bright Park Phase 2 grand reopening, and that's at 10 o'clock, and with a barbecue following at 11:30. And attendees are encouraged to ride their bikes since it's May's Bike Month. This Saturday, May 12th, there's an open house at Fire Station 41, and that's at 11 a.m. Then on Monday, we have the Via Rideshare launch event at 10 a.m. At Riverfront Street and Ballpark Drive near Rayleigh Field. Then we have a lot of things coming up. May 17th, we have the Jump launch at Rayleigh Field at 8:30 a.m. And on May 19th, Saturday, is the Police Department's Youth Football Clinic at 9 a.m. at River City High School. And also, there's a couple of edits to the calendar itself. The WASAFCA meeting is actually on May 15th, on a Tuesday, and the Riverfront Joint Powers Authority meeting is also on May 15th.
All right, any questions on the calendar? City manager report?
Just briefly now. Last night, the Economic Development Housing staff, really led by Katie Yancey, had a workshop on open house on Pioneer Bluff and Stone Lock, and we were really surprised in terms of the turnout. About 100 people showed up, very, very positive about the vision for that area. They're going to compile the comments and come back on May 23rd. We've talked a lot about May 23rd. It's going to be a big agenda, but this will be one of them.
Yeah, I got terrific feedback from a variety of folks in various parts of the community about last night, so congrats to the staff. Okay, questions of the city manager report? City attorney report? Staff direction from members of the council? Nope. All right, we have no future agenda item requests. I covered that already.
What's it?
So, Mr. Johannesson moves.
I'll second.
Mr. Ledesma seconds. The meeting be adjourned. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.